Good day, lovely viewers. Welcome to the Fanfic Club. We have an exciting story lined up for you today. What if Harry collapsed during sorting ceremony and Pomfrey found 52 memory charms blocking his magical core? Your engagement means the world to us. Like, comment, and subscribe to help us grow and bring you more amazing content. Without wasting any time, let's start. Chapter 1. The Unraveling. The Great Hall of Hogwarts hummed with excitement as nervous first-years shuffled forward one by one, each taking their turn beneath the ancient sorting hat. Hundreds of candles floated overhead, casting a warm golden glow across 4 long tables where older students watched with varying degrees of interest. The enchanted ceiling above mirrored the clear night sky, stars twinkling against velvety darkness. Harry Potter stood in the dwindling line, his palms slick with sweat. A dull pressure had been building behind his eyes ever since he'd stepped off the Hogwarts Express. Now it pulsed with each heartbeat, a steady throb that made it difficult to focus on Professor McGonagall's crisp voice calling out names. "You all right?" Ron whispered beside him. "You look peaky." Harry managed a tight smile. "Just nervous, I guess." But it was more than nerves. Something felt wrong, had felt wrong since crossing the castle threshold. As if the ancient stone walls were pressing against his mind, provoking something buried deep inside him. Granger, Hermione. The bushy-haired girl Harry had met on the train practically ran to the stool, jamming the hat eagerly onto her head. Harry watched, squinting slightly as the pain intensified. His vision blurred around the edges. "Gryffindor," the hat shouted after a moment's deliberation. "More names. More sorting." Harry swayed slightly, grateful when Ron steadied him with a concerned glance. "Malfoy, Draco." The blonde boy Harry had met in Madame Malkin strode forward with unearned confidence. The hat barely touched his head before declaring, "Slytherin." Harry's headache sharpened suddenly, like a knife sliding between his thoughts. A strange humming filled his ears, drowning out the next few names. Fragmented images flickered through his mind, a flash of green light, a woman's scream, high cold laughter, all familiar from his nightmares, but now accompanied by something new, a sensation of power, vast and electric, flowing through him only to slam against invisible barriers. "Potter, Harry." The hall fell silent as Harry stumbled forward. Whispers immediately erupted, following him like persistent shadows. "The Harry Potter? Look at his scar. Smaller than I expected." Harry gripped the edges of the stool, the world tilting dangerously as Professor McGonagall lowered the sorting hat onto his head. The moment the ancient fabric touched his hair, something inside him shifted. Said a small voice in his ear. "Difficult. Very difficult. Plenty of courage, I see. Not a bad mind, either. There's talent, oh my goodness, yes, but what's this?" The voice paused, and Harry felt something probe deeper, pushing against those strange barriers in his mind. "Curious," the hat murmured. "Someone has been quite thorough with you, Mr. Potter. Layers upon layers. I cannot see all that you are." Harry gripped the stool tighter. "What do you mean?" He thought desperately. "Something is very wrong here," the hat continued, its voice sounding troubled. "Your mind has been," the hat never finished. The pressure in Harry's head exploded into blinding pain. The barriers the hat had disturbed trembled, cracked, and something vast and wild surged up from the depths of his being. Magic. Raw, untamed magic. Harry's back arched as golden light erupted from his skin. The last thing he heard was the alarmed shout of Professor McGonagall and hundreds of gasps before darkness claimed him. Albus Dumbledore had witnessed many unusual events in his long life, but seeing Harry Potter collapse in a burst of golden light during his sorting was certainly among the more alarming. He reached the boy's side in 3 long strides, kneeling beside the unconscious child as the other students erupted into frightened chatter. "Silence!" McGonagall commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. Dumbledore placed a wrinkled hand on Harry's forehead and immediately snatched it back, stunned by the magical energy radiating from the boy. It pulsed beneath his skin like a living thing, wild and desperate. "Minerva, clear the hall," he instructed quietly. "Severus, assist me in taking Mr. Potter to the hospital wing immediately." The potions master stepped forward, his face impassive but his dark eyes sharp with calculation. "Headmaster, that discharge of magic, later, Severus," Dumbledore cut him off. "Pomfrey needs to examine him now." Together they levitated Harry's small form, the boy's messy black hair falling back to reveal the famous lightning scar, which, Dumbledore noted with mounting concern, now glowed with the same golden light that had erupted from him moments before. As they hurried through the stone corridors, Harry's magic continued to flare in unpredictable bursts, shattering a nearby window and sending the portraits into frightened disarray. Snape cast a containment charm around the boy, his wand movements precise despite the brisk pace. "This is no ordinary magical exhaustion," Snape muttered, his eyes never leaving Harry's face. "The boy's core is destabilized." Dumbledore said nothing, but the familiar twinkle in his blue eyes had dimmed to something grave and worried. They burst through the hospital wing doors, startling Madame Pomfrey, who had been preparing beds for the inevitable beginning of term mishaps. "Albus! What on earth?" She stopped mid-sentence, professional instincts taking over as she rushed toward Harry's floating form. "On the bed there. What happened?" "He collapsed during the sorting," Dumbledore explained as they gently lowered Harry onto crisp white sheets. "Some kind of magical episode." Pomfrey's wand was already moving in intricate diagnostic patterns. "Everyone back, give me space to work." Her face grew increasingly troubled as colored lights appeared above Harry's body, forming complex patterns that made her eyes widen in disbelief. "This can't be right," she murmured, casting another, more specialized diagnostic spell. The results made her gasp. "Poppy?" Dumbledore stepped forward, concern etched in every line of his ancient face. "Albus." She looked up, her expression a mixture of shock and rising anger. "There are magical blocks on this child. Dozens of them. Memory charms layered so thick I can barely see through them to his core." "That's impossible," Snape said sharply. "No child could survive that level of magical interference. See for yourself." She gestured at the diagnostic display, where pulsing red layers now appeared stacked atop one another around a brilliant gold sphere that represented Harry's magical core. Snape leaned closer, his sallow face illuminated by the magical display. For once, his carefully maintained mask of indifference slipped, revealing genuine shock. 52, he counted in disbelief. 52 separate memory charms and magical bindings. Dumbledore stepped closer, his face unreadable as he examined the display. "When were they placed?" "The oldest ones date back to when he was approximately 15 months old," Pomfrey replied, her voice tight with controlled fury. "The most recent was applied this summer." A heavy silence fell over the hospital wing, broken only by the irregular pulsing of Harry's magic, which caused nearby potion bottles to rattle on their shelves. "Who would do such a thing?" McGonagall asked from the doorway, having just arrived after settling the students. "And why?" Before anyone could answer, Harry's body suddenly arched off the bed, another surge of golden light emanating from his skin. The nearest window cracked from floor to ceiling. "His core is fighting the bindings," Pomfrey explained urgently, casting stabilizing spells. "The sorting hat must have disturbed the memory charms. They're unraveling, but too quickly, it could kill him if we don't intervene." "What do you need?" Dumbledore asked, rolling up his sleeves. "I need to remove them systematically," she said, already summoning additional supplies. "Starting with the most recent and working backward. It will take time, but removing them all at once would overwhelm his system." As Pomfrey prepared her workstation, Snape moved closer to Dumbledore, speaking in a voice too low for the others to hear. "Headmaster, only a handful of wizards in Britain have the skill to place memory charms of this complexity. Fewer still would have access to the boy over such an extended period." Dumbledore met his potion master's gaze steadily. Your point, Severus. My point, Snape replied coldly, is that you arranged for the boy's placement and monitoring all these years. Did you know about this? The headmaster's face remained impassive. I placed certain protections on Harry, yes. For his safety and the greater good. But nothing of this magnitude. Snape's eyes narrowed, but before he could press further, Harry let out a pained moan, drawing everyone's attention. He's regaining consciousness, Pomfrey announced. I've stabilized the most immediate breaks in the memory charms, but I'll need to begin removing them properly. It would be best if most of you left. I will stay, Dumbledore said firmly. As his magical guardian, I should be present. Something flashed in Pomfrey's eyes, a challenge, perhaps, but she merely nodded. Very well. The rest of you, out. Minerva, please inform the students that Mr. Potter is being treated for magical exhaustion and the feast will continue. As the others reluctantly departed, Pomfrey turned back to Harry, whose eyelids were beginning to flutter. The first memory charm appears to be linked to his encounter with you on his birthday, Headmaster, she noted, her voice neutral but her implications clear. Dumbledore sighed heavily, suddenly looking every one of his many years. I placed a mild calming charm on him, nothing more. To help him process the shock of learning about magic. Pomfrey's expression suggested she didn't entirely believe him, but she focused on her patient. Regardless, it's interwoven with something much more complex. I'll have to remove both together. She raised her wand, murmuring an incantation in ancient Celtic. A thin silver thread emerged from Harry's temple, glowing with an unnatural blue light. Pomfrey carefully extracted it, depositing the memory into a special containment vial. The moment the charm lifted, Harry's eyes flew open, and he bolted upright with a gasp that turned into a scream. Magic exploded from him in a visible shockwave, shattering every glass object in the hospital wing. Harry! Dumbledore moved to restrain him, but Pomfrey blocked his path. Don't touch him. His magic is raw and reactive. The boy's eyes darted around wildly, unfocused and glowing with the same golden light that pulsed beneath his skin. He's lying, Harry whispered, his voice strange and distant. The letters, so many letters, they knew I was in the cupboard, they always knew. Pomfrey frowned, casting another diagnostic charm. He's experiencing memory bleed-through. The charm was suppressing more than just a single memory. Harry's gaze suddenly locked onto Dumbledore, and his expression transformed from confusion to something harder, more aware. You, he said, his voice suddenly clearer. You told Hagrid not to tell me. You wanted me ignorant. Dumbledore stepped forward cautiously. Harry, my boy, you're confused. The magical backlash, don't lie to me. Harry's shout was accompanied by another pulse of magic that shook the entire room. I remember now. I asked Hagrid why Voldemort came after me, and he started to answer, but then he got this funny look and said Dumbledore said not to tell me yet. An uncomfortable silence followed this accusation, broken only when Harry winced, pressing his palms against his temples. My head, there's so much, trying to get through. Lie back, Mr. Potter, Pomfrey instructed gently, helping him recline. The memory charm I removed was connected to several others. What you're experiencing is fragments of suppressed memories attempting to resurface all at once. Harry looked at her with pain-filled eyes. Why would someone do this to me? Why would they make me forget? Pomfrey cast a pointed look at Dumbledore before answering. That's what we intend to find out, Mr. Potter. But first, we need to stabilize you. Your magical core has been artificially suppressed for years, and now it's breaking free too quickly. Harry's breathing was becoming labored, sweat beading on his forehead as he fought against the pain. It hurts, he whispered. Like something huge is trying to squeeze through a pinhole. An apt description, Pomfrey murmured, already preparing a potion. Drink this. It will help regulate your magical output while I work on removing the charms safely. Harry took the vial with shaking hands. Will I remember everything? Once they're gone. She hesitated, glancing at the complex diagnostic display still hovering above him. Memory charms this extensive and long-standing, there may be permanent damage. But yes, I believe much of what was hidden from you will return. As Harry drank the potion, his eyes never left Dumbledore's face. The suspicion in them was new and jarring, nothing like the odd admiration the headmaster had expected from James and Lily's son. I want Ron and Hermione, Harry said suddenly, his voice stronger. If I'm going to go through this, I want friends here. Dumbledore opened his mouth as if to object, but Pomfrey was already nodding. A wise request. Having emotional support during trauma can be beneficial. Albus, perhaps you could arrange for Mr. Weasley and Miss Granger to visit tomorrow, once we've stabilized the immediate situation. The headmaster recognized the dismissal for what it was. Of course, he conceded gracefully. Harry, I understand you're frightened and confused. I assure you, all of this will be explained in time. Harry's expression remained guarded, but the potion was already taking effect, his eyelids growing heavy. Sure, he mumbled, the golden glow finally fading from his skin as he drifted into an uneasy sleep. Once certain he was unconscious, Pomfrey turned to Dumbledore, her professional demeanor barely masking her fury. Albus, I've worked at this school for decades. I've respected your authority and your secrets. But this, she gestured at the diagnostic display, this is beyond anything I could have imagined. A child's mind and magic, tampered with to this extent, it borders on criminal. Dumbledore's face remained impassive. I understand your concern, Poppy. But there are factors at play here beyond, don't, she interrupted, surprising them both. Don't speak to me of the greater good or necessary evils. I am a healer, and my only concern is my patient. A patient who has been subjected to magical abuse of the highest order. She drew herself up, meeting his gaze without flinching. I am invoking healer's authority over Mr. Potter's case. As of this moment, all decisions regarding his treatment and who may visit him fall under my jurisdiction, not yours. Dumbledore's blue eyes flashed with something dangerous. That is a serious step, Poppy. These are serious circumstances, headmaster. She did not back down. I will, of course, keep you informed of his progress. But until I understand exactly what has been done to this child and by whom, I must prioritize his well-being above all other considerations. For a long moment, they stood in silent opposition. Finally, Dumbledore inclined his head slightly. As you wish. But remember, Voldemort's defeat was not the end. There are protections around Harry that are essential for his survival. Then explain them to me, Pomfrey challenged. Help me understand what legitimate protection could possibly require 52 separate memory charms on a child. When no explanation was forthcoming, she turned back to her patient. That's what I thought. Good night, headmaster. Dumbledore departed without another word, his usually purposeful stride slightly less certain than when he'd entered. Left alone with her unconscious patient, Pomfrey allowed herself a moment of pure, unadulterated rage. In 40 years of healing, she had never seen such systematic magical interference in a child. The complex web of charms didn't merely block memories, they had been specifically designed to suppress and redirect Harry's natural magical development, creating artificial pathways that severely limited his abilities. What were they so afraid of, she whispered, studying the golden core that pulsed beneath the layers of suppression. Even hobbled as it was, Harry's magical signature was extraordinary, not simply strong, but complex and unusual in ways she'd rarely encountered. A soft moan from Harry drew her attention. Though still unconscious, his face contorted in pain as another memory fought its way to the surface. Pomfrey placed a gentle hand on his forehead, channeling a mild healing charm to ease his discomfort. Rest now, she murmured. Tomorrow, we begin setting you free. Hermione Granger couldn't sleep. The Gryffindor girls' dormitory was filled with the soft breathing and occasional snores of her new housemates, but her mind refused to quiet, replaying the shocking events of the evening. Harry Potter, the Harry Potter, had collapsed during his sorting in a burst of golden light that still danced behind her eyelids when she closed them. The professors had whisked him away immediately, and though Professor McGonagall had later assured them he was merely suffering from magical exhaustion and would recover soon, Hermione wasn't convinced. She'd read about magical exhaustion in modern magical ailments, and it didn't typically manifest with glowing golden light or unconsciousness. Something else was happening, something the professors didn't want to explain. With a sigh, she slipped out of bed, pulled on her dressing gown, and made her way down to the common room. Perhaps reading by the fire would calm her thoughts enough for sleep. To her surprise, she wasn't alone. A lanky redhead sat hunched in an armchair, staring into the dying embers. Ron. He looked up, startled. Oh. Hi, Hermione. Couldn't sleep either. He shook his head. Keep thinking about Harry. That wasn't normal. What happened to him? Hermione settled into the adjacent chair. No, it wasn't. I've read about magical exhaustion, and that definitely wasn't it. Dad works at the ministry, Ron said slowly. He's mentioned cases where wizards' magic gets bottled up somehow, and when it finally breaks free. He made an explosive gesture with his hands. Like a pressure cooker, Hermione mused. But what would cause magical pressure to build up like that in an 11-year-old? Ron shrugged. Dunno. But Harry's different, isn't he? Surviving the killing curse and all that. They sat in thoughtful silence for a moment before Hermione spoke again. I'm worried about him. Being in a strange place, surrounded by strangers when something like this happens. Yeah. Ron picked at a loose thread on his maroon pajamas. I know we only just met him on the train, but I liked him. Seemed like a decent bloke. Hermione nodded, remembering how Harry had politely introduced himself without any of the arrogance she might have expected from someone famous. We should visit him tomorrow. See if he needs anything. Reckon they'll let us? Hospital wing's usually pretty strict. We can at least try. Hermione's tone had that determined quality that suggested obstacles would be merely temporary inconveniences. After breakfast, before classes start. Ron nodded, and they lapsed into companionable silence. Neither realized it yet, but this late-night worry session was the foundation of what would become a fierce and loyal friendship, not just with Harry, but with each other. In the hospital wing, Harry's dreams were anything but peaceful. With the first memory charm removed, others had begun to weaken, allowing snippets of suppressed memories to surface in his unconscious mind. He was 4 years old, standing in the backyard of Privet Drive. Dudley had been chasing him all morning, threatening to use him as punching practice. Cornered against the garden shed, terrified, Harry had felt something building inside him, a pressure-seeking release. Suddenly, he was on the roof of the school kitchens, the bullies below looking around in confusion. Relief and exhilaration filled him. He'd done something amazing, something special. Then a tall figure with a long beard appeared from nowhere, looking down at him with twinkling blue eyes that somehow didn't seem kind. This won't do, Harry, the man said softly, raising a wand. Not yet. Not until you're ready. A flash of light, and then. He was back in the Dursleys' yard, being dragged by his uncle toward the cupboard, with no memory of how he'd escaped Dudley or why his uncle was so furious. The scene shifted. Age 7. The school library had become his sanctuary, the one place Dudley never bothered to look for him. He'd discovered a book on meditation, fascinated by the idea of controlling one's mind and emotions. For weeks he practiced in the quiet corners of his cupboard, and gradually began to sense something within himself, a pool of energy, vast and waiting. He learned to draw upon it when needed. When Aunt Petunia cut his hair and it grew back overnight. When the ugly sweater she tried to force over his head shrank to doll size. When the hunger pains were too much, and somehow his scraps became more filling. Then the strange incidents around the neighborhood began. Lights flickering when he walked past. Water from broken pipes diverting around him during a rainstorm. a bully's shoelaces tying themselves together when he approached Harry. The bearded man returned, appearing in his cupboard one night like a ghost. "Impressive control for one so young," he murmured, studying Harry with those twinkling eyes that now seemed calculating. "Too impressive, perhaps. We must keep you humble, Harry. Pride before the fall, you know." Another flash of light. And suddenly Harry couldn't access that inner pool anymore. The strange incident stopped. He was just Harry again, unwanted, unloved, and utterly ordinary. More fragments came, faster now, a letter addressed to "the cupboard under the stairs," his uncle's panicked expression. Hagrid's kind face twisted with confusion mid-explanation. "Now, wait just a moment, I was about to tell ya why you know who," his eyes going unfocused, then clearing. "Professor Dumbledore says that's a conversation for another time, Harry. Don, you worry about it now." Standing in Ollivander's shop as wand after wand failed to respond, until finally one did, with an explosion of power that made the wandmaker step back in alarm. "Curious and curiouser," he'd muttered. Then a tall shadow falling across the doorway. Later, the same wand in his hand, but somehow, muted. As if something had changed between the shop and King's Cross. In his hospital bed, Harry twitched and moaned, his fingers clutching at the sheets as his mind pieced together a fractured history he'd never been allowed to remember. Golden light pulsed beneath his skin in time with the revelations, and objects around the room gently vibrated in response. Madame Pomfrey, dozing in a chair nearby, awoke instantly. She watched the diagnostic display with professional interest, noting how the magical bindings shifted and strained as Harry's suppressed memories fought for release. "Remarkable," she whispered, recording her observations. "His core is naturally dismantling the weaker charms now that the process has begun." She adjusted his blankets and cast a monitoring charm to alert her to any dangerous fluctuations. Tomorrow would bring challenges, but for now, Harry Potter was doing what he apparently did best, defying magical expectations. Dawn broke over Hogwarts in streamers of pink and gold, illuminating the castle's ancient stones with soft light. In the hospital wing, Harry opened his eyes slowly, wincing at the brightness. His head still ached, but the unbearable pressure had subsided to a dull throb. "Ah, you're awake." Madame Pomfrey appeared at his bedside, her crisp uniform and alert expression suggesting she'd been up for hours. "How are you feeling, Mr. Potter?" Harry considered the question carefully. "Like someone's been using my head for bludger practice," he finally replied. "But better than last night." "That's to be expected." She handed him a potion that smelled faintly of peppermint. "This will help with the headache." As Harry drank, he glanced around the hospital wing, noting the repaired windows and the absence of shattered glass. "Did I do all that?" he asked quietly. Pomfrey nodded. "A rather spectacular display of accidental magic, though accidental isn't entirely accurate in your case." Harry set the empty vial aside. "Those memory charms you mentioned. I started remembering things last night. Things that were taken from me." "I expect you did." Pomfrey sat beside his bed, her professional demeanor softening slightly. "The removal of the first charm has weakened the others. Your mind is naturally trying to recover what was locked away." Harry stared down at his hands, which still occasionally flickered with faint golden light. "Why would someone do this to me? Block my memories, suppress my magic?" "That," Pomfrey said carefully, "is what we intend to discover. But first, we need to address your immediate medical needs. Those memory charms didn't just hide memories, they've been actively suppressing your magical development for years." Harry looked up sharply. "What does that mean, exactly?" "It means, Mr. Potter, that your magical core, the source of your power, has been artificially constrained. Imagine trying to redirect a river through a garden hose. The pressure builds, causing damage over time. Is that why I feel so different now? Like there's something huge inside me trying to get out?" Pomfrey nodded. "Precisely. The Sorting Hat's interaction with your mind disturbed the careful structure of the charms. Now they're unraveling, but too quickly for your system to adjust. We need to remove them systematically to avoid magical shock. Harry absorbed this information, his expression troubled. Will I be normal after? Or am I damaged permanently? Something flickered across Pomfrey's face, anger, perhaps, though not directed at him. There may be some lasting effects from such long-term suppression. But wizardkind is remarkably resilient, Mr. Potter. And from what I've observed of your core, you have exceptional magical potential. Before Harry could ask more questions, the hospital wing doors opened to admit Professor McGonagall, followed closely by Ron and Hermione. Mr. Potter, McGonagall nodded stiffly, though her eyes betrayed concern. How are you feeling this morning? Better, thank you, Professor, Harry replied automatically. McGonagall turned to Pomfrey. These two have been insistent on visiting since breakfast. I've explained that Mr. Potter needs rest, but, actually, Pomfrey interrupted, I think visitors would be beneficial. Mr. Potter requested their company last night, and emotional support is an important component of healing. McGonagall's eyebrows rose slightly, but she didn't object. Very well. I'll return before lunch to discuss scheduling your missed classes. As she departed, Ron and Hermione approached Harry's bed cautiously. You look awful, mate, Ron blurted out, earning an elbow in the ribs from Hermione. What Ron means, she said primly, is that we were worried about you. That was quite a scene last night. Harry managed a weak smile. Sorry for the drama. Not exactly how I planned to start school. Drama follows you, doesn't it? Ron grinned, perching on the edge of a nearby chair. First the boy who lived, now the boy who glowed. Mr. Weasley, Pomfrey cut in, I'd appreciate it if you didn't make light of a serious medical condition. Ron's ears turned red. Sorry, Madame Pomfrey. She nodded, then addressed all three children. I need to consult with Professor Snape about some healing potions. I'll be back shortly. Mr. Potter, remember what we discussed about controlling your emotional state. Your friends can help by keeping conversation calm and positive. After she left, Hermione immediately leaned forward. What did she mean, controlling your emotional state? What's really happening to you, Harry? Harry glanced toward the closed office door, then lowered his voice. Someone's been messing with my head. Lots of someones, maybe. Madame Pomfrey found 52 different memory charms on me. Ron's jaw dropped. 52. That's mental. No one uses that many memory charms unless they're trying to, he stopped abruptly. Unless they're trying to what? Harry pressed. Ron shifted uncomfortably. Well, in the Ministry, when they want to completely reshape how someone thinks or what they can do, they layer memory charms. Dad mentioned it once. Said it's considered dark magic, usually. Hermione's eyes widened. But who would do that to Harry? And why? I think. Harry hesitated, the memories from his dreams still fragmented but troubling. I think Dumbledore might be involved. I remembered him, or someone who looked like him, appearing at the Dursleys when I was younger. After I did accidental magic. Dumbledore? Hermione looked scandalized. But he's the greatest wizard of our age. Why would he, to control me, maybe, Harry interrupted, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. To keep me weak until he decided I was ready for something. The three fell silent, the implications too enormous to process immediately. What happens now? Ron finally asked. Madame Pomfrey is going to remove the charms gradually, Harry explained. She says my magic's been suppressed for years, and it's all trying to break free at once. As if on cue, a golden spark danced across his fingertips, making Ron and Hermione jump. Blimey, Ron whispered. I've never seen magic do that. Hermione's expression had shifted from shock to intense curiosity. This is fascinating from an academic perspective. I wonder if, she was interrupted by the hospital wing doors bursting open to admit Severus Snape, his black robes billowing dramatically as he strode toward them. "Miss Granger, Mr. Weasley," he drawled, "I don't recall authorizing a social gathering in the hospital wing." Madame Pomfrey said they could visit, Harry said quickly, disliking Snape immediately. The potions master's dark eyes fixed on Harry with an intensity that was almost physical. "Indeed? How accommodating of her. Nevertheless, I require privacy to administer these potions and conduct further diagnostics." Neither Ron nor Hermione moved. "That was not a suggestion," Snape added coldly. "It's okay, guys," Harry told his new friends. "I'll see you later, yeah." Reluctantly, Ron and Hermione gathered their things. "We'll come back after classes," Hermione promised. "I'll take notes for you in everything." After they departed, Snape set a tray of potion vials on the bedside table and fixed Harry with that same penetrating stare. "Mr. Potter," he said finally. "You continue your family tradition of making spectacular entrances." Harry bristled. "I didn't exactly plan to collapse, sir." "No." A thin eyebrow arched upward. "One wonders what you did plan, given the extremely unusual magical discharge." Before Harry could retort, Pomfrey emerged from her office. "Ah, Severus, excellent. Did you bring the magical stabilizer I requested?" "Of course." Snape indicated a vial of silvery liquid. "Though I maintain that a more aggressive approach would be prudent. These fluctuations in his core could become dangerous." "I'm right here," Harry pointed out irritably. "And it's my core you're talking about." Both adults turned to him, Pomfrey looking faintly apologetic while Snape merely seemed annoyed at the interruption. "Indeed it is, Mr. Potter," Pomfrey acknowledged. "And you have every right to understand your treatment. Professor Snape believes we should suppress your magic temporarily while removing the memory charms, while I favor a more gradual approach that allows your core to stabilize naturally." "Suppress my magic?" Harry shook his head vehemently. "No. No more suppression. I've had enough of that." Snape's lip curled. Predictably Gryffindor response. "All courage, no caution." "I wasn't sordid," Harry reminded him. The hat never finished. Something flickered in Snape's expression, surprise, perhaps. "Nonetheless, your father's impulsiveness clearly runs in your veins. These magical surges could endanger everyone around you, not just yourself." "My father?" Harry's interest was immediately piqued. "You knew my father?" A shadow passed over Snape's sallow features. "Unfortunately, yes. But that is irrelevant to your current situation." "I disagree," Pomfrey interjected, shooting Snape a warning look. "Mr. Potter's family history may be highly relevant, particularly given the timing of the earliest memory charms." Snape's eyes narrowed. "Meaning what, exactly?" "The oldest charms date to when he was approximately 15 months old," Pomfrey explained, watching Snape carefully. "Shortly after his parents' murder." Harry felt a chill run through him. "Someone started messing with my memories right after my parents died?" "Why?" Neither adult immediately answered, but Harry caught a silent exchange of glances between them that suggested they both had theories they weren't sharing. "That," Pomfrey finally said, "is a question that deserves answers. But first, let's address your immediate medical needs. Professor Snape has prepared several potions that will help stabilize your core while I work on removing the next layer of charms." Harry eyed the tray of potions warily. "How do I know these won't suppress my magic too?" Snape's nostrils flared. "If I wished to poison you, Potter, I would choose something far more subtle than a medical potion administered under Madame Pomfrey's supervision." Not exactly reassuring, Harry muttered, but he accepted the first vial Pomfrey handed him. As he drank, a strange tingling sensation spread through his body, followed by a sense of his magic, which had been chaotically surging, settling into a more rhythmic pattern. "Better?" Pomfrey asked, monitoring the diagnostic display. Harry nodded. It feels less frantic now. More controlled. Good. Now, I'm going to attempt to remove another of the memory charms. This one appears to be linked to your early childhood, approximately age 5. It may cause some disorientation as the memories return. She raised her wand, beginning the complex incantation. Harry felt a strange tugging sensation in his mind, as if someone were gently untangling a knot. Then a silver thread emerged from his temple, glowing with that unnatural blue light. As Pomfrey guided it into a containment vial, Harry gasped as a flood of memories crashed through him. The primary school library. Books calling to him like friends. Finding a book on meditation. Discovering his inner light, as he called it then. The pure joy of connecting with his magic for the first time. Making small objects float when no one was looking. Healing a cut on his finger with just a thought. The freedom and wonder of it all. Then Aunt Petunia finding him practicing. Her horrified face. Freak. Uncle Vernon's purple rage. The cupboard for a week without food. And later, the tall bearded man appearing silently in his cupboard at night. Such a clever boy, Harry. But too clever by half, I think. The time isn't right for such explorations. Harry blinked back to the present, his breath coming in short gasps. He took it from me, he whispered. I found my magic on my own, when I was 5. I was teaching myself to use it. And he just took it away. Who, Potter? Snape asked sharply. Who took it away? Dumbledore. Harry met Snape's gaze steadily. He came to the Dursleys' house at night. He said I was too clever by half, and the time wasn't right. Then he cast a spell, and after that, I couldn't access my magic anymore. I forgot I'd ever been able to. Pomfrey and Snape exchanged another meaningful look. That aligns with the magical signature on this particular charm, Pomfrey confirmed, examining the captured memory. Albus cast this one personally. Snape's expression had gone completely blank, though a muscle twitched in his jaw. Interesting, was all he said. Harry looked between them. Why would he do that? Why stop a magical child from learning about their own magic? Control, perhaps, Pomfrey suggested quietly. Or protection, as he would likely claim. Or preparation, Snape added cryptically. The question is, preparation for what? Before Harry could press for clarification, the hospital wing doors opened once more. This time, it was Dumbledore himself who entered, resplendent in robes of midnight blue scattered with silver stars. Ah, Harry, my boy. I'm pleased to see you looking better this morning. His blue eyes twinkled benevolently behind half-moon spectacles, but Harry now found the expression calculating rather than kind. Harry said nothing, studying the headmaster with new wariness. Dumbledore seemed to notice the change, his smile faltering slightly. Poppy, how is our patient progressing? As well as can be expected, given the circumstances, she replied neutrally. We've just removed another memory charm. One dating to his 5th year of life. I see. Dumbledore's expression revealed nothing, but his gaze flicked briefly to the containment vial holding the extracted charm. And the results? Enlightening, Harry answered before Pomfrey could. I remembered how you visited me in my cupboard after I discovered my magic on my own. How you told me I was too clever, then took it all away. A heavy silence fell. Dumbledore's eternally pleasant expression didn't change, but something in his eyes hardened. Memory charms can be disorienting, Harry, he said gently. What you're recalling may be fragmented or confused, no. Harry's interruption was quiet but firm. It's perfectly clear. You erased my ability to use magic consciously. You made me forget I'd ever been able to. Why? Dumbledore sighed heavily, suddenly looking ancient. You were too young to understand the complexities. Try me now, Harry challenged, surprising himself with his boldness. The headmaster glanced at Pomfrey and Snape. Perhaps this is a conversation best had in private. No, Pomfrey said firmly. As Mr. Potter's healer, I must insist on being present for any discussion that might affect his treatment. The same courtesy extends to Professor Snape, who is assisting with the potions regimen. Dumbledore's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Very well. He conjured a comfortable chintz armchair and sat beside Harry's bed. Harry, what you must understand is that your situation has always been unique. The night your parents died, when Voldemort's curse rebounded, something extraordinary happened. Your survival created magical circumstances never before documented. And that required 52 memory charms? Harry asked skeptically. Dumbledore's eyebrows rose. You've been quite thorough, Poppy. I've been quite accurate, she corrected. Each charm catalogued and analyzed. Dumbledore nodded slowly. The majority of those charms were placed for your protection, Harry. Some to shield you from traumatic memories of that night. Others to guide your magical development along safe pathways. Safe for whom? Harry pressed. Something flashed in Dumbledore's eyes, irritation, perhaps, at being questioned so directly by an 11-year-old. For everyone, including yourself. Uncontrolled magical development in a child with your potential could have been catastrophic. But it wasn't uncontrolled, Harry argued, the memories still fresh. I was learning to control it. I could make things move without touching them. I could heal small injuries. I wasn't hurting anyone. You were 5 years old, Harry. A child that young cannot possibly understand the responsibilities that come with such power. So instead of teaching me, you erased it. Harry felt anger building, and with it, that now familiar golden light began to shimmer beneath his skin. You left me defenseless with people who hated magic, who punished me for accidental magic I couldn't control because you'd taken away my ability to control it. As his voice rose, objects around the room began to vibrate. Potion bottles rattled on shelves, and the windows hummed ominously. Potter, Snape said sharply. Control your emotions. Harry shot him a glare but took several deep breaths, remembering Pomfrey's warnings about magical surges. Gradually, the objects around them stilled. You see? Dumbledore said softly. Even now, with years more maturity, your magic responds explosively to emotion. Imagine that power in a 5-year-old experiencing a tantrum. That doesn't justify memory charms, Pomfrey interjected. Magical education exists precisely to help children develop control. Memory modification of this scale goes far beyond reasonable intervention. Dumbledore fixed her with a steady gaze. There were other factors, Poppy. Prophecies. Blood protections. Threats that remained even after Voldemort's fall. Prophecies. Harry latched onto the word immediately. What prophecies? A moment of silence stretched as Dumbledore appeared to weigh his options. That is a conversation for another time, when you're fully recovered and, no. Harry's interruption was quiet but firm. No more secrets. No more, when you're ready. Look what your secrets have done already. He gestured at the diagnostic display still showing the layers of charms embedded in his magical core. Another tense silence followed, broken unexpectedly by Snape. The boy has a point, Headmaster. His tone was carefully neutral. These memory charms were clearly intended to shape Potter's development according to some predetermined plan. Given their unraveling, that plan is now compromised regardless. Perhaps transparency would be more prudent than continued obfuscation. Dumbledore's gaze sharpened as he looked at his potions master. A surprising position from you, Severus. Snape's expression revealed nothing. I simply see no benefit in maintaining secrets that are already failing. Better to control the narrative than allow random memory fragments to shape the boy's understanding. Dumbledore studied him for a long moment before turning back to Harry. Very well. Shortly before your birth, a prophecy was made concerning Voldemort and a child who would have the power to defeat him. That child was you, Harry. This is why he came to Godric's Hollow that night, why he tried to kill you, and why he will try again when he eventually returns to power. Harry stared at him, stunned by both the revelation and Dumbledore's casual certainty about Voldemort's return. He's coming back. I believe so, yes. Which is why your preparation, including the careful management of your magical development, has been so crucial. But that still doesn't explain 52 separate memory charms, Pomfrey insisted. Or why you felt it necessary to block his natural magical growth rather than nurture it. Dumbledore steepled his fingers. The prophecy specifies that Harry will have power the Dark Lord knows not. I believed, and still believe, that this power must develop in a particular way to fulfill the prophecy. Too much, too soon would have alerted Voldemort's remaining followers. Too little would leave Harry unprepared when the time came. So you decided exactly how powerful I should be at each age? Harry asked, incredulous. You mapped out my entire magical development without even knowing me. I did what I thought necessary to keep you alive and prepare you for your eventual confrontation with Voldemort. By keeping me ignorant. By making me live with people who hated me. By erasing my memories every time I showed too much potential. Harry's voice rose again, and with it, that golden light returned to his skin. That wasn't protection, that was control. Pomfrey stepped forward quickly. Albus, this conversation is becoming too agitating for my patient. I must insist we continue it another time. Dumbledore rose smoothly from his chair, which vanished as he did. Of course, Poppy. Harry needs rest. He turned to Harry, his expression grave but kind. I understand you're angry, my boy. You have every right to be. But please believe that everything I've done has been with your best interests at heart. Harry met his gaze steadily. Maybe you believe that, Headmaster. But from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been treating me like a weapon you're crafting, not a person. Something flickered in Dumbledore's eyes, surprise, perhaps, at such insight from one so young. We'll speak again when you're feeling better, he said finally, moving toward the door. In the meantime, I hope you'll consider that sometimes, the greater good requires difficult choices. After he departed, a heavy silence fell over the hospital wing. Harry stared at his hands, which still glowed faintly with golden light. Well, Pomfrey said briskly, that was illuminating. Snape made a noncommittal sound, his dark eyes unreadable as they studied Harry. Indeed. Though I suspect the headmaster shared only what he felt necessary to placate us, not the full truth. Harry looked up. What do you think the full truth is, Professor? For a moment, it seemed Snape might not answer. Then he said carefully, I think, Potter, that your role in the coming war is more complex than Dumbledore has revealed. And that the power mentioned in this prophecy may be something he fears as much as he values. Severus, Pomfrey warned, speculation without evidence isn't helpful. On the contrary. Snape gestured at the diagnostic display. The evidence is quite clear. These aren't just memory charms, they're magical bindings designed to redirect and reshape Potter's natural magical development. One doesn't apply such extensive constraints to something one fully trusts. Harry absorbed this, a cold feeling settling in his stomach. So he's afraid of me? Or what I might become? Perhaps, Snape allowed. Or perhaps he simply believes that power requires careful management. The headmaster has always been selective about who wields significant magical influence in our world. Pomfrey cleared her throat. This philosophical debate, while fascinating, isn't helping my patient recover. Professor Snape, if you've delivered the potions, I believe Harry needs rest before we attempt to remove another charm. Snape nodded curtly and moved toward the door. He paused briefly, glancing back at Harry. Potter. Whatever else happens, remember that magic responds to intent as much as ability. Control your mind, and you control your power. With that cryptic advice, he departed, leaving Harry alone with Pomfrey. He's an odd one, Harry commented. Pomfrey smiled faintly. Professor Snape is complicated. But he's an exceptional potions master, and despite appearances, I believe he has your best interests at heart. Harry wasn't convinced, but he was too exhausted to argue. The conversation with Dumbledore had drained him, and the newly recovered memories still swirled chaotically in his mind, demanding integration. Rest now, Pomfrey instructed, helping him lie back against the pillows. Your friends can visit again later, but your mind and magic need time to stabilize after this morning's revelations. As Harry drifted towards sleep, fragments of memories continued to surface, practicing simple spells in the secrecy of his cupboard, the pure joy of connection with his magic, Dumbledore's repeated appearances to erase his progress, and always, that sense of something vast and powerful within him, straining against artificial constraints. No more, he thought fiercely as consciousness faded. No more cages. No more chains. Whatever this power is, it's mine. And I'm taking it back. In the dungeons of Hogwarts, Severus Snape stood before a bubbling cauldron, adding ingredients with mechanical precision while his mind worked on a far more complex problem. The boy was not what he had expected. Not at all. For a decade, Snape had nurtured his hatred of James Potter's son, imaging a spoiled, arrogant child raised on tales of his own greatness. Instead, he'd found a thin, wary boy with Lily's eyes and a magical core unlike anything he'd ever seen. And now this, evidence that Dumbledore had been systematically suppressing the boy's natural abilities, redirecting his development like a gardener pruning a plant to grow in a specific direction. The question was why? Why constrain a child prophesied to defeat the Dark Lord? Why limit his power rather than nurture it? Unless... Snape's hand stilled above the cauldron as a troubling thought took shape. Unless Dumbledore feared what Potter might become after defeating the Dark Lord. Unless the headmaster was playing a longer, more complex game than anyone realized. The prophecy had specified that neither could live while the other survived. But it hadn't specified what would happen after, should Potter succeed. Snape had never questioned Dumbledore's methods before. The headmaster had given him a second chance when no one else would, had protected him from Azkaban, had promised to help keep Lily's child safe. But this... He resumed stirring, his movements precise even as his thoughts raced. Perhaps it was time to reconsider old loyalties. Not to return to the Dark Lord, never that. But perhaps to chart a more independent course. To observe. To question. And perhaps, for Lily's sake if nothing else, to ensure her son had the tools to survive whatever destiny Dumbledore had planned for him. In his office atop the tallest tower, Albus Dumbledore paced before Fawkes's perch, his usual serenity notably absent. "It's all unraveling too quickly," he murmured to the Phoenix, who watched him with intelligent eyes. "I had years of careful planning, each memory charm designed to release at specific points in his development. Now they're collapsing like dominoes." Fawkes trilled softly, a sound that usually soothed the headmaster. Today it did little to calm his troubled thoughts. Dumbledore paused before the window, gazing out at the grounds where students enjoyed the late summer sunshine. "I never wanted to be cruel, old friend. Every charm was necessary. Every constraint carefully calculated. The prophecy was only part of it, of course." Albus had recognized the signs in baby Harry immediately after that fateful Halloween night. The magical resonance. The unusual aura. The way ambient magic gravitated toward the child even as he slept. An elemental. The first natural elemental wizard born in over 3 centuries. A child who could potentially manipulate raw magical energy without the normal constraints of spellwork or wand channeling. Such power, uncontrolled, would have been catastrophic, both for Harry and for the wizarding world at large. So Albus had done what seemed necessary. The first charms, placed while Harry still slept in the ruins of Godric's Hollow, had been designed to dampen his elemental nature, to redirect his developing magic along more conventional pathways. The blood protection at Privet Drive served dual purposes, shielding him from Death Eaters while also helping suppress his unusual abilities through proximity to non-magical relatives. It should have worked perfectly. Each charm designed to weaken gradually as Harry matured, allowing controlled growth until he was old enough to understand and master his gifts. Now, instead, the boy's elemental nature was breaking free all at once, raw, untrained, and potentially devastating. I should have anticipated this, Dumbledore sighed. The Sorting Hat's magic is ancient and powerful. Of course it would disrupt the charms when it tried to read his true nature. Fawkes chirped again, more insistently this time. Yes, yes, I know, Dumbledore responded, as if understanding the Phoenix perfectly. He deserves the truth. Or at least part of it. But you didn't see his eyes today, old friend. He looked at me the way one looks at an enemy, not a mentor. The headmaster returned to his desk, unlocking a drawer with a complex wand movement. Inside lay a small crystal phial containing swirling silver-blue memory strands, a copy of the prophecy, in its entirety. Beside it rested a much older artifact, a small obsidian disc carved with elemental symbols that pulsed with inner light. If he's to face Tom, he needs control, Dumbledore murmured. But if I've lost his trust already? The problem had no easy solution. Force the memory charms back into place, and he risked permanent damage to Harry's mind and magic. Allow them to unravel naturally, and he risked an untrained elemental wizard with justifiable anger toward those who had constrained him. Either way, the carefully orchestrated path he'd planned for the boy who lived had been irreparably altered. For perhaps the first time since taking the mantle of Hogwarts headmaster, Albus Dumbledore found himself without a clear strategy, and that, more than anything, troubled him deeply. The hospital wing glowed with afternoon sunlight when Harry next opened his eyes. He felt surprisingly better, his head clearer, the pressure in his chest less oppressive. Even the golden light beneath his skin had settled to a faint shimmer rather than erratic flares. "There you are," said a cheerful voice. "Thought you might sleep through dinner too." Harry turned to find Ron sitting beside his bed, a chess set balanced on his knees. Hermione occupied the adjacent chair, an enormous book open in her lap. "What time is it?" Harry asked, sitting up carefully. "Just past 4, Hermione replied, marking her place in the book. "We've been here since classes ended. Madame Pomfrey said we could stay as long as we didn't wake you." Harry smiled, genuinely touched by their dedication to someone they'd only just met. "Thanks for coming back." Ron shrugged, ears turning slightly pink. "Snothing. Besides, hospital's boring without visitors. Brought chess to teach you, if you're feeling up to it. And I've taken detailed notes in all the classes you missed," Hermione added, indicating a neat stack of parchment on the bedside table. "Professor McGonagall said you'll need to catch up once you're released." "Released sounds like I'm in prison," Harry joked, though part of him felt that wasn't far from the truth. Hermione bit her lip. "Harry, what's really happening?" "All the professors would say is that you had some kind of magical exhaustion, but the way you collapsed, with that golden light." Harry glanced toward Pomfrey's office, weighing how much to share. He barely knew Ron and Hermione, but they had shown more genuine concern for him than anyone else in his memory. And if what he suspected about Dumbledore was true, he needed allies he could trust. "It's complicated," he began quietly. "And weird. And honestly, kind of scary." Over the next several minutes, he explained what Pomfrey had discovered, the memory charms, the suppression of his magic, Dumbledore's involvement, and the prophecy. As he spoke, he watched their expressions shift from curiosity to shock to outrage. 52 memory charms. Hermione whispered, horrified. That's barbaric. Even in the most extreme medical cases, the recommended maximum is 3 or 4, spaced over years. Ron was shaking his head in disbelief. Dumbledore did this? Dumbledore? Dad always said he was the greatest wizard alive, the champion of what's right. Maybe he thought he was doing the right thing, Harry said, surprised to find himself offering a partial defense of the man who had manipulated his entire life. He claims it was to protect me, to prepare me for eventually facing Voldemort again. Both of his friends flinched at the name. Sorry, Harry added. I forgot about the whole name that must not be spoken thing. It's just, no one says it, Ron explained, looking pale. Bad memories from the war. Hermione, however, had latched onto something else. You said Dumbledore believes you know who is coming back. That can't be possible. He died the night he attacked you. Harry shook his head. According to Dumbledore, he's not really dead. Just, weakened, I guess. And he'll try to return to power somehow. A heavy silence fell as they absorbed this. Finally, Ron spoke again, his voice unusually serious. So what happens now? With your magic, I mean. Those charms breaking down, is it dangerous? Harry flexed his fingers, watching the faint golden light that still shimmered beneath his skin. Madame Pomfrey is removing them gradually to prevent magical shock. But yes, it's a bit dangerous. My magic's been constrained for so long that it's all trying to break free at once. That explains the exploding windows, Hermione said thoughtfully. Your magic responding to emotional distress. Harry nodded. It's like, imagine having a giant inside you that's been drugged and chained for years. Now the drugs are wearing off, the chains are breaking, and the giant's really angry about being imprisoned. Ron looked alarmed. That doesn't sound good, mate. It's not all bad, Harry countered. The magic itself feels, right. Natural. Like I'm finally becoming who I was supposed to be all along. He hesitated, then added softly, it's the first time I've ever felt powerful. Like I'm not just a victim of what happens to me. Hermione's expression softened. Oh, Harry. Don't look at me like that, he said quickly. I don't want pity. I want to understand what's happening to me, and why, and how to control it. We'll help, Hermione declared without hesitation. Whatever you need. Yeah, Ron agreed. Dumbledore or no Dumbledore, mates stick together. Harry blinked, momentarily overwhelmed by this unconditional support from people who barely knew him. Thanks, he managed. That means a lot. Before the conversation could continue, Madame Pomfrey emerged from her office, carrying a tray of potions. Ah, good, you're awake, Mr. Potter. How are you feeling? Better, Harry replied honestly. Clearer. The pressure isn't as bad. Excellent. She set the tray down and performed a quick diagnostic charm. The stabilizing potions are working well. Your core is adjusting to the removal of the first two charms. When can he leave? Ron asked hopefully. Pomfrey gave him a stern look. Not for several days at least, Mr. Weasley. Removing these charms is delicate work, and Mr. Potter's magical stability remains precarious. What about my sorting? Harry asked suddenly, realizing he still didn't officially belong to a Hogwarts house. The hat never announced where I should go. That, said a new voice from the doorway, is a matter we shall need to address carefully. Professor McGonagall entered, carrying a familiar patched and frayed wizard's hat. The sorting hat has been most insistent about speaking with you again, Mr. Potter. It claims your sorting was improperly interrupted by foreign magical interference. Harry eyed the hat warily. Is it safe? Last time didn't go so well. Madame Pomfrey believes that with the first layers of memory charms removed, the interaction should be less explosive. McGonagall's tone was dry, but her eyes reflected genuine concern. However, we'll proceed with caution. She placed the sorting hat on the foot of Harry's bed rather than directly on his head. Ah, Mr. Potter, the hat spoke immediately, its voice audible to everyone present. Our first meeting was most irregularly terminated. Sorry about that, Harry replied, feeling somewhat foolish talking to a hat in front of his friends. Apparently I had some magical issues. Issues is putting it mildly, the hat chuckled. I've sorted students for 1,000 years, and never have I encountered a mind so thoroughly tampered with. 52 separate memory charms, if Madame Pomfrey's diagnosis is correct. It is, Pomfrey confirmed grimly. Most disturbing, the hat continued. Particularly as many of those charms bear the magical signature of headmasters past and present. A clear violation of the Charter of Hogwarts, which expressly forbids mental manipulation of students by school leadership. McGonagall's lips thinned to a tight line. That is a serious accusation. It is a factual observation, the hat corrected. I was created by the founders themselves, Deputy Headmistress. I recognize the magical signatures of all who have worn me, including every headmaster since Godric himself. An uncomfortable silence followed this pronouncement. So, Harry said finally, about my sorting. Ah, yes. The hat seemed to perk up. Now that the immediate barriers have been reduced, I can better assess your true nature. Though I must say, your case remains most unusual. Unusual how? Hermione couldn't resist asking. The hat's fabric wrinkled in what might have been a smile. Mr. Potter possesses qualities valued by all 4 houses in abundance. Courage and daring for Gryffindor, certainly. A keen and curious mind that Ravenclaw would prize. Loyalty and work ethic worthy of Hufflepuff. And yes, ambition and resourcefulness that would serve him well in Slytherin. Ron made a choking sound at that last suggestion, but the hat ignored him. However, it continued, the most unusual aspect is not these qualities themselves, but the nature of Mr. Potter's magic. It is elemental. McGonagall gasped softly. That's not possible. Elemental wizards are exceedingly rare. There hasn't been a confirmed case in centuries. Nevertheless, the hat insisted, that is what I sense beneath the remaining charms. Raw magical potential, unbounded by the usual constraints of wizarding magic. It is this nature, I suspect, that someone has gone to great lengths to suppress. Harry looked between McGonagall and Pomfrey, both of whom appeared stunned by this revelation. What's an elemental wizard? It was Hermione who answered, her voice hushed with awe. A wizard who can manipulate magic in its raw form, without conventional spells or sometimes even wands. They're incredibly rare, almost mythical. The last documented elemental was Morgana Le Fay in the 10th century. Quite correct, Miss Granger, the hat approved. 5 points too, but you've already been sorted, haven't you? Gryffindor, as I recall. Focus, please, McGonagall prompted. We need to determine Mr. Potter's house placement. Yes, the hat muttered. Though I maintain that house placement is rather secondary to the discovery that young Mr. Potter is potentially the first natural elemental wizard born in over 1,000 years. Harry felt everyone's eyes on him, and the familiar golden light sparked beneath his skin in response to his discomfort. Could we just sort me? Please. Very well. The hat seemed almost disappointed at having its revelations cut short. Considering all factors, including the need for support during this transitional period, I believe Mr. Potter would best flourish in Gryffindor. The final word was announced with the same volume and authority as during the regular sorting ceremony. Ron let out a whoop of delight, and Hermione beamed. Welcome to Gryffindor, Mr. Potter, McGonagall said, a rare smile softening her stern features. When Madame Pomfrey deems you ready to join the general student population, your belongings will be moved to the first-year boys' dormitory. Thank you, Professor, Harry replied, feeling a strange mix of emotions. Relief at finally having a house. Happiness at being with his new friends. But also apprehension about these new revelations. An elemental wizard? What did that even mean for his future? As if reading his thoughts, the sorting hat spoke again. One final observation, Mr. Potter. The memory charms placed upon you were not merely to suppress knowledge or experiences. They were specifically designed to redirect your elemental nature into more conventional magical pathways. As they continue to unravel, your true abilities will emerge. You would be wise to seek proper guidance in their control. From who? Harry asked. If elemental wizards are so rare, who could possibly teach me? An excellent question, the Hat acknowledged. One I suggest you pose to the headmaster, who seems to have taken such keen interest in the development of your abilities. With that parting shot, the Hat fell silent, once again just a shabby piece of magical headwear. McGonagall carefully collected it, her expression thoughtful. I shall inform the headmaster of your sorting, Mr. Potter. And... She hesitated, glancing at Pomfrey. I believe we need to discuss these new revelations about your magical nature in greater detail. However, that conversation should wait until you're more fully recovered. After she departed, Ron and Hermione stared at Harry with wide eyes. Blimey, Ron breathed. An elemental wizard. That's incredibly rare and potentially dangerous, Hermione finished. The histories say elemental wizards could control weather, move earth, generate fire or water from nothing, all without conventional spells. Harry looked down at his hands, watching the golden light that danced beneath his skin. Is that what this is? My elemental magic breaking through? I believe so, Pomfrey confirmed, finishing her notations on his chart. Which explains why the headmaster was so determined to contain it. Elemental magic is powerful but notoriously difficult to control, especially for a child. But to use memory charms instead of training? Hermione sounded outraged. There are historical precedents for young elemental wizards being identified and properly trained from an early age. Perhaps the circumstances of Mr. Potter's life made such training impossible, Pomfrey suggested diplomatically. After all, he was placed with Muggle relatives for his protection following his parents' murder. Or perhaps, Harry said quietly, Dumbledore didn't want me to know how powerful I could be. Not until he decided it was time. No one had an immediate response to that troubling possibility. Either way, Pomfrey said finally, our immediate concern is stabilizing your magic as the remaining charms are removed. We'll continue the process tomorrow morning with the next layer. She handed Harry another potion. This will help you sleep without dreams tonight. Your mind needs rest to integrate the memories you've recovered. As Harry drank the potion, his last conscious thought was to wonder what other revelations awaited him as the remaining 50 memory charms unraveled. And, more worryingly, how Dumbledore would react to having his carefully laid plans disrupted so thoroughly. Elsewhere in the castle, 3 separate conversations were taking place about Harry Potter. In the headmaster's office, Albus Dumbledore listened gravely as Minerva McGonagall related the Sorting Hat's proclamation. An elemental wizard, he repeated, though he didn't sound surprised. The Hat is certain. It seemed quite confident, McGonagall confirmed. Albus, is it true? Did you place memory charms on the boy to suppress his natural abilities? Dumbledore sighed heavily. I placed protections, Minerva. Harry's power, uncontrolled, could have been catastrophic, both for himself and others. Protections, she repeated skeptically. 52 separate memory charms is rather beyond protective measures, wouldn't you say? You weren't there the night I left him at Privet Drive, Dumbledore said quietly. Even unconscious, barely more than a baby, his magic was extraordinary. The ambient energy around him shifted and flowed according to his dreams. The very air seemed to vibrate with potential. All the more reason he should have received proper training from the beginning. And who would have provided this training? Dumbledore challenged gently. The last confirmed elemental wizard died centuries ago. The few texts that exist on elemental magic are theoretical at best, dangerously misleading at worst. McGonagall's expression remained disapproving. So instead, you chose to suppress his natural abilities entirely? To block his memories whenever he showed signs of his true potential? I chose to guide his development along safer pathways until he was old enough to understand the responsibility his power entails. Dumbledore rose and moved to the window, gazing out at the darkening sky. Perhaps I was wrong, Minerva. Perhaps I should have found another way. But I did what I believed necessary to protect both Harry and our world from power neither was ready to handle. And now, she pressed. Now that these charms are breaking down, what will you do? Dumbledore turned back to her, his ancient face lined with worry. Now, I believe, we must all prepare for a very different Harry Potter than the one we expected to teach. In the Slytherin head's office, Severus Snape sat across from Lucius Malfoy, who had arrived via Flo under the pretext of discussing his son's educational arrangements. An elemental? Lucius repeated, swirling fire whiskey in a crystal glass. You're certain? The Sorting Hat declared it in front of witnesses, Snape confirmed. And the magical signature I observed during Potter's episode was consistent with elemental manifestation. Lucius leaned forward, grey eyes gleaming with interest. The Dark Lord suspected something unusual about the boy, beyond the prophecy. This would explain why a mere infant could have deflected the killing curse. Perhaps. Snape's tone revealed nothing of his thoughts. And Dumbledore knew, Lucius continued, not phrasing it as a question. All these years, he's kept the boy's true nature hidden, even from his own staff. It appears so. Lucius studied his old friend carefully. This changes the landscape considerably, Severus. If the boy's elemental nature is now emerging beyond Dumbledore's control. Indeed. Snape met his gaze steadily. Though I would caution against any premature actions. The situation remains volatile. Potter's magic is unstable, his future uncertain. Of course, of course. Lucius waved a dismissive hand. Mere observation is all that's required at present. Though perhaps Draco might benefit from cultivating a relationship with the boy. Elemental wizard or not, Potter will need allies who understand our world better than he does. Snape's expression soured slightly. Based on their initial interactions, I doubt Potter and Draco are destined for friendship. Lucius smiled thinly. Children are adaptable, Severus. Especially when properly motivated. He set his empty glass aside. Keep me informed of any significant developments. This information is most valuable. After Lucius departed, Snape remained at his desk, contemplating the complex web of interests now converging around Harry Potter. Dumbledore with his grand designs. Lucius, and by extension, the dormant Death Eater faction, with their opportunistic scheming. And somewhere, the disembodied Dark Lord himself, who would certainly take great interest in the boy's newly revealed nature once word reached him. Potter would need more than luck to navigate the dangerous waters ahead. He would need guidance that served his interests, not merely those who sought to use him. For Lily's sake, if nothing else, Snape resolved to provide that guidance, even if the boy never knew or appreciated the source. In the Gryffindor common room, Ron and Hermione sat in a quiet corner, speaking in hushed tones despite the noisy game of exploding snap happening nearby. An elemental wizard, Ron said for perhaps the 10th time that evening. My dad's told stories about them, but I always thought they were exaggerated. Like wizard fairy tales. They're not fairy tales, Hermione insisted. Just incredibly rare. I wish the library wasn't closed, I'd love to research historical accounts. First thing tomorrow, then. Ron suggested, surprising her with his apparent enthusiasm for academic research. Hermione beamed. Absolutely. Harry's going to need all the information we can find about elemental magic if he's going to learn to control it properly. Ron nodded, his expression unusually serious. We can't let him face this alone. Not with Dumbledore being, well, whatever he's being. Manipulative, Hermione supplied, her voice hardening. Placing 52 memory charms on a child is beyond unethical. It's abusive. Maybe, Ron allowed. But Dumbledore's supposed to be the greatest wizard alive. He must have had reasons. Reasons don't justify methods, Hermione argued. And from what Harry remembered about his childhood, Dumbledore deliberately kept him ignorant and helpless with those awful relatives of his. Ron shook his head slowly. It's hard to believe, isn't it? Everything we've been told about Harry Potter, the boy who lived, and now this. Memory charms, suppressed powers, prophecies. I think, Hermione said carefully, that we may be the only people at Hogwarts who know the real Harry, not the legend or the weapon Dumbledore's been trying to craft. Then we'd better make sure we don't let him down, Ron declared with surprising conviction. As the common room gradually emptied, they remained in their corner, planning how best to help their new friend navigate the challenging days ahead, unaware that their loyalty would soon be tested in ways none of them could imagine. In the hospital wing, Harry slept deeply under the influence of Pomfrey's dreamless sleep potion. The golden light beneath his skin pulsed gently in rhythm with his heartbeat, occasionally flaring brighter as another memory charm weakened. Unbeknownst to anyone, the magical bindings Dumbledore had so carefully constructed over the years were unraveling faster than Pomfrey's controlled removal process could account for. Each charm that broke down weakened those around it, creating a cascade effect that would soon accelerate beyond anyone's ability to manage. By morning, Harry Potter would be one step closer to becoming what he was always meant to be, for better or worse. Chapter 2, Fractured Memories. Dawn light filtered through the hospital wing's high windows, painting golden rectangles across the stone floor. Harry blinked awake slowly, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. As awareness returned, so did the memories of the previous day, his collapse during the sorting, Madame Pomfrey's disturbing discovery of 52 memory charms, his confrontation with Dumbledore, and the Sorting Hat's proclamation that he was an elemental wizard. He sat up, noticing with surprise that the golden light beneath his skin had intensified overnight. It no longer appeared in occasional flares but flowed continuously just beneath the surface, like liquid sunlight through his veins. "Ah, you're awake," Madame Pomfrey said, emerging from her office. She stopped short when she saw him, her professional composure momentarily slipping. "Oh my! What?" Harry asked, looking down at himself. "Is something wrong?" Pomfrey approached cautiously, wand already moving in diagnostic patterns. "The process appears to be accelerating," she said, more to herself than to Harry. "The magical bindings are destabilizing faster than anticipated." The diagnostic display above Harry's bed confirmed her assessment. Where yesterday there had been distinct layers of red magical bindings surrounding his golden core, now they appeared fragmented, with thin golden tendrils pushing through the cracks like plant roots breaking through concrete. "Is that bad?" Harry asked, watching the display with fascination. "Not necessarily bad," Pomfrey replied carefully, "but certainly concerning. The controlled removal process I planned may no longer be viable if the charms are collapsing on their own." As if to illustrate her point, a small section of red binding in the display suddenly cracked and dissolved, allowing another golden tendril to break through. Simultaneously, Harry gasped as a memory surfaced with startling clarity. Age 6. A playground near Privet Drive. Dudley and his friends chasing him as usual. Cornered against a fence, heart pounding with fear. Then a surge of something inside him, and suddenly he was on the roof of the school kitchens, safe from his tormentors. The pure elation of escape, of having done something impossible. Then confusion as he couldn't remember how he'd gotten up there. "Harry?" Pomfrey's voice broke through the memory. "Are you with me?" He blinked, returning to the present. "Yes, sorry. Another memory just came back. From when I was 6. Without me removing a charm." Pomfrey frowned, checking the diagnostic display again. "This confirms my concern. The charms are breaking down organically now that the process has begun." Before Harry could respond, the hospital wing doors opened to admit Professor McGonagall, followed by Professors Dumbledore and Snape. "Good morning, Harry," Dumbledore greeted cheerfully, as if their tense confrontation the previous day had never happened. "I trust you slept well." Harry nodded warily, noticing how Dumbledore's gaze lingered on the golden light visible beneath his skin. "Poppy, how is our patient progressing?" McGonagall asked, her sharp eyes taking in the diagnostic display with evident concern. "The situation has become more complex," Pomfrey replied, her tone professional but cool. The memory charms are breaking down faster than anticipated. Mr. Potter just experienced a spontaneous memory recovery without any intervention on my part. Troubling, Snape murmured, studying the diagnostic display with intense focus. The magical signatures are degrading rapidly. Dumbledore approached Harry's bed, his expression grave. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward the display. Pomfrey hesitated before nodding. "You may observe, Headmaster. But I maintain Healer's authority in this case." Dumbledore inclined his head in acknowledgement before examining the magical display. His usually twinkling eyes grew serious as he noted the golden tendrils breaking through the red bindings. "His elemental nature is asserting itself more quickly than expected," he observed. "The foundation charms are still holding, but the secondary and tertiary layers are failing." "Foundation charms?" Harry asked sharply. "What are those?" Dumbledore sighed. "The primary memory and binding charms, placed shortly after your parents' deaths. They form the base upon which the others were constructed." "And what exactly do they suppress?" Harry pressed, his temper rising. The golden light beneath his skin brightened in response, making Snape take an instinctive step back. "Memories of that night," Dumbledore answered carefully. "And the initial manifestation of your elemental abilities." "Initial manifestation?" McGonagall's voice was sharp with surprise. "Albus, are you saying Harry displayed elemental magic as an infant?" "Indeed," Dumbledore confirmed. "In the aftermath of the killing curse, with his parents' freshly sacrificed lives still magically present, Harry's innate elemental nature awoke. The magical backlash was extraordinary. When I arrived at Godric's Hollow, the nursery was untouched by the explosion that had destroyed much of the house. A perfect sphere of protection, centered on Harry's crib." Harry stared at Dumbledore, trying to process this revelation. "I protected myself. As a baby?" "Your magic did," Dumbledore corrected. "Raw, instinctual, and powerfully elemental. It was this, I believe, that allowed you to survive the killing curse, not merely your mother's sacrifice, though that was certainly a crucial component." A tense silence followed this revelation, broken eventually by Snape. "If what you say is true, Headmaster, then Potter's elemental nature emerged fully formed that night. Yet you chose to suppress it rather than nurture it. Why?" All eyes turned to Dumbledore, whose aged face revealed nothing of his thoughts. "Elemental magic responds to emotion, Severus. A grieving infant with uncontrolled elemental abilities would have been a danger to himself and everyone around him. The suppression was meant to be temporary, until Harry was old enough for proper training. Yet you maintained and reinforced those suppression charms for 10 years, Pomfrey pointed out, her tone neutral but her eyes hard. "Long after the immediate danger had passed." "The timing was delicate," Dumbledore replied. "Too soon, and Harry might have revealed his abilities to his Muggle relatives or their community. Too late, and control would become more difficult to establish. And you alone decided when that right time would be," Harry said quietly, his voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath. "You alone decided how much of my own magic and memories I was allowed to have." Dumbledore met his gaze steadily. "Yes, Harry. I did. As your magical guardian, I made decisions I believed were in your best interest. My best interest included being left with people who hated magic. Who locked me in a cupboard and treated me like a servant. Who punished me for accidental magic I couldn't control because you'd blocked my ability to control it." The accusation hung in the air, unanswered. Harry felt a surge of satisfaction at the flicker of discomfort that crossed Dumbledore's face. "The blood protection," Dumbledore began. "Was that real?" Harry interrupted. "Or just another convenient excuse to keep me isolated and ignorant?" "It was, and is, very real," Dumbledore assured him, though his usual confidence seemed slightly diminished. "Your mother's sacrifice created a powerful protective enchantment that shields you from Voldemort and his followers, but only while you can call home the place where her blood dwells. Some protection, Harry muttered. Safe from dark wizards but not from being starved and locked up by my own relatives. An uncomfortable silence fell, broken eventually by Professor McGonagall clearing her throat. Perhaps we might focus on the immediate medical situation, she suggested, her Scottish accent more pronounced than usual. Particularly as Mr. Potter's condition appears to be deteriorating rather than stabilizing. All eyes returned to the diagnostic display, where more cracks had appeared in the red binding layers. Yes, of course, Dumbledore agreed, visibly relieved by the change of subject. Poppy, what do you recommend at this stage? Pomfrey's lips thinned as she considered the options. Given the accelerating breakdown, I believe our safest approach is to remove several of the more unstable charms immediately, then monitor the situation. A controlled release may help prevent a catastrophic collapse of all remaining bindings. I concur, Snape said unexpectedly. The magical pressure is building. Better to release it strategically than wait for an explosion. Dumbledore nodded slowly. Very well. Which charms do you intend to remove first? Those dating from his early Hogwarts preparations, Pomfrey replied. Ages 9 through 11. They appear to be the most unstable currently. Harry felt a chill run through him. You put memory charms on me when you were preparing me to come to Hogwarts. What exactly didn't you want me to remember? Dumbledore's expression remained carefully neutral. Various preliminary assessments of your magical potential, Harry. Standard procedure for Muggle-raised wizards with unusual power levels. Standard procedure involves 52 memory charms, does it? Harry shot back, his temper flaring again. The golden light beneath his skin pulsed in response, causing the nearest potion bottles to vibrate on their shelves. Potter, Snape interjected sharply. Control your emotions. Your magic is responding to your anger. Harry took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down. The bottles gradually stopped shaking, though the golden light continued to flow visibly through his veins. Sorry, he muttered, not feeling particularly sorry at all. Still getting used to this whole elemental magic responds to emotions thing. Which is precisely why careful training is essential, Dumbledore pointed out, his tone maddeningly reasonable. Elemental wizards historically required years of disciplined study to achieve reliable control. Then maybe you should have started teaching me years ago instead of erasing my memory every time I showed a hint of ability, Harry retorted. Before Dumbledore could respond, Pomfrey stepped between them. This discussion, while relevant, is increasing my patient's agitation, which in turn destabilizes his magic. I must insist we proceed with the removal process immediately, with only essential personnel present. Of course, Poppy, Dumbledore conceded gracefully. Severus will stay to assist with potions as needed. Minerva and I will await your report. As Dumbledore and McGonagall departed, Harry could have sworn he saw a flicker of approval in McGonagall's eyes as she glanced back at him. Pomfrey waited until the door closed before turning to Harry. Now then, Mr. Potter. This process will be more intensive than our previous attempts. I'll be removing several charms in succession, which may cause a flood of returning memories. Are you prepared? Harry nodded, determination replacing his anger. I want to remember. Whatever it is, I need to know. Very well. She began preparing her equipment while Snape arranged a series of potions in a specific order beside the bed. These are stabilizing drafts, the potion's master explained, seeing Harry's suspicious look. Each is calibrated for a different level of magical disturbance. Should your core become dangerously unstable during the process, they will help regulate the flow of power. Why are you helping me? Harry asked bluntly. You don't seem to like me much. Something flickered in Snape's dark eyes. My personal feelings are irrelevant, Potter. Your condition presents a potentially catastrophic magical event if mishandled. I am merely acting to prevent such an outcome. Harry wasn't entirely convinced, but Pomfrey interrupted before he could press further. Ready? She asked, her wand poised. Remember to breathe through any discomfort. The memories may feel overwhelming initially, but try to let them flow rather than fighting them. Harry nodded and closed his eyes, bracing himself. He felt the now familiar tugging sensation in his mind as Pomfrey began the complex incantation to remove the first charm. The silver-blue thread emerged from his temple, followed immediately by a rush of memory. Age 9. A stern-looking witch with square glasses, McGonagall, though he hadn't known her name then, appearing at Privet Drive while the Dursleys were out. Just a preliminary assessment, Mr. Potter. Standard procedure for Muggle-raised magical children. Her shock at his living conditions. The cupboard under the stairs. Her tightly controlled anger as she cast diagnostic spells similar to Pomfrey's. This is unacceptable. Albus assured me you were being well cared for. Then her face changing, confusion replacing anger. Dumbledore appearing suddenly. Thank you, Minerva. I'll take it from here. McGonagall leaving, looking strangely blank-eyed. Then Dumbledore turning to him, wand raised. I'm afraid we're not quite ready for changes yet, Harry. Soon, but not today. Light flashing, and the memory gone. McGonagall visited me, Harry gasped as the memory solidified. When I was 9. She saw the cupboard. She was angry about how the Dursleys treated me. Then Dumbledore showed up and did something to her. Made her forget what she'd seen. Snape and Pomfrey exchanged glances. That would explain Minerva's reaction yesterday, Pomfrey murmured. She seemed genuinely shocked by the extent of the memory charms. Because her own memory was modified, Snape concluded, his expression darkening. The headmaster has been more thorough than even I suspected. Before Harry could process this disturbing revelation fully, Pomfrey was already moving to remove the next charm. Another silver-blue thread emerged, another flood of memories. Age 10. Strange incidents increasing around Privet Drive. Lights flickering when he walked past. Water pipes bursting but the water flowing around him like it was alive. The Dursleys' television exploding when Uncle Vernon shouted at him. His fear and confusion, but also that secret thrill of power. Then night, his cupboard, Dumbledore again. You're developing faster than anticipated, Harry. Your Hogwarts letter will come soon, but we must maintain the status quo until then. Another flash of light, another gap in his memory. He kept coming back, Harry said, his voice tight with anger. Every time my magic started breaking through, he'd show up and push it back down. Control your emotions, Potter, Snape warned as the golden light flared brighter beneath Harry's skin. The headmaster's actions can be addressed later. For now, focus on stabilizing your core. Harry took several deep breaths, forcing his anger back. As his emotions settled, so did the golden light, though it continued to pulse visibly. One more, Pomfrey said, already preparing for the third extraction. This one dates to just before your Hogwarts letter arrived. The third silver-blue thread emerged, bringing with it the most disturbing memory yet, the first Hogwarts letter. Address on the envelope, Mr. H. Potter, the cupboard under the stairs. Uncle Vernon's panic. Letters multiplying, flooding the house. Escaping to the hut on the rock. Hagrid arriving at midnight. You're a wizard, Harry. The flood of relief, of finally understanding. Hagrid explaining about his parents, about Voldemort. He was gaining power back then. Dark days, Harry. You know who killed anyone who stood up to him. Your mum and dad were as good a witch and wizard as I ever knew, but you know who wanted him dead, and not just 'cause they were fighting him. What do you mean? Harry had asked, hanging on every word. Well, there's something about you, Harry. Something he could sense even then. Something that made you a threat to him. You weren't just the child of members of the Order. You were. Hagrid's eyes had suddenly gone unfocused, his brow furrowing in confusion. Sorry, got carried away. Point is, he tried to kill you and couldn't. That's why you're famous. Later, after Hagrid fell asleep, Harry exploring his newfound knowledge, feeling that familiar power stirring within. Tentatively reaching for it, finding it more accessible than ever before. The shack trembling slightly as golden light flickered across his skin for the first time. Then dawn, but before Hagrid awoke, another visitor. Dumbledore, looking troubled. Earlier than planned, but no matter. Adjustments can be made. Wand raised, memory gone. Harry's eyes snapped open, his breath coming in short gasps. Hagrid knew, he said hoarsely. He started to tell me something about why Voldemort wanted me dead. Something besides the prophecy. He said there was something about me that Voldemort could sense even then, something that made me a threat. Your elemental nature, Snape said quietly. The Dark Lord would have recognized it immediately. Such power, even in an infant, would represent a significant threat to his plans. Harry stared at him. You mean Voldemort tried to kill me because I'm an elemental wizard? Not just because of some prophecy. Both, most likely, Pomfrey interjected, monitoring the diagnostic display closely. The prophecy identified you as a threat, but your elemental nature would have confirmed it in his mind. Harry struggled to process this new information. His parents hadn't died simply because they were in Voldemort's way, or even just because of a prophecy. They had died because their son possessed a rare and powerful magical nature that threatened the Dark Lord. Before he could fully absorb this revelation, a sharp pain lanced through his head. The diagnostic display showed another section of binding cracking spontaneously. His core is destabilizing again, Pomfrey announced urgently. The removed charms are accelerating the breakdown of the others. Snape immediately handed Harry one of the prepared potions. Drink. Quickly. Harry complied, grimacing at the bitter taste. Almost immediately, the pain receded, and the golden light beneath his skin settled into a more regular pulse. Better? Pomfrey asked, still monitoring the display. Harry nodded, though his mind was reeling from the revelations. So all this time, Dumbledore knew why Voldemort really came after me. He knew about my elemental abilities. But he kept it from me, kept modifying my memory whenever I started to discover the truth. So it appears, Snape acknowledged, his tone neutral but his dark eyes calculating. The question is why? Control, Harry said immediately. He wanted to control when and how I discovered my abilities. He wanted to control my development, my knowledge, everything about me. Perhaps, Snape allowed. Or perhaps he genuinely believed you needed protection from knowledge that might burden a child. Harry shot him a skeptical look. Is that what you really think? That he was protecting me by keeping me ignorant and powerless? Something flickered in Snape's expression, a hint of approval, perhaps. I think, Potter, that the headmaster's intentions are likely more complex than either simple control or simple protection. But intentions aside, the effects of his actions are now painfully clear. Before their conversation could continue, the hospital wing doors opened to admit Ron and Hermione, laden with books. Harry! Hermione exclaimed, rushing forward before stopping abruptly at the sight of Snape. Oh, sorry, professors. We didn't mean to interrupt. Your timing is actually quite fortuitous, Miss Granger, Pomfrey said. We've just completed a series of charm removals, and Mr. Potter could benefit from some time with friends while his magic stabilizes. Snape looked as if he might object, but after glancing at the diagnostic display, he merely nodded curtly. I shall return in 1 hour with the next batch of stabilizing potions. Until then, Potter, remember what I said about controlling your emotions. After he swept from the room, Pomfrey retired to her office, leaving Harry alone with his friends. Blimey, mate, Ron said, staring at the golden light visible beneath Harry's skin. You're properly glowing now. Yeah, Harry agreed, looking down at his arms where the light flowed like liquid gold through his veins. Side effect of the memory charms breaking down, apparently. Hermione set her stack of books on the bedside table. We've been researching elemental wizards, she announced. It's fascinating, Harry. There's not much information, they're incredibly rare, but what we did find is remarkable. Tell me, Harry urged, eager for any information about his condition that didn't come filtered through Dumbledore's perspective. Well, Hermione began, clearly in her element. Elemental wizards differ from regular wizards in several fundamental ways. While most wizards need wands to focus and direct their magic, elementals can manipulate magical energy directly. They don't just cast spells, they can actually control raw magical force. That's what the golden light is, Harry realized. Raw magical energy. Exactly. Hermione beamed at him. According to Magical Anomalies Through the Ages, elemental wizards typically manifest their abilities through one or more natural elements, earth, air, fire, water, but the most powerful can manipulate pure magical energy itself. The book said Merlin was probably one, Ron added excitedly. And maybe the founders too, though nobody knows for sure. Harry tried to process this. So I'm like Merlin? Potentially, Hermione tempered, ever practical. But it depends on your specific abilities and how well you learn to control them. The books emphasize that elemental magic requires intense discipline and training. Training that Dumbledore made sure I never got, Harry pointed out bitterly. Every time I started to discover my abilities as a kid, he'd show up and erase my memory. He quickly recounted the memories he'd recovered during the charm removals, watching his friends' expressions shift from curiosity to outrage. That's horrible. Hermione exclaimed when he finished. Modifying Professor McGonagall's memory too, it's just wrong. Mental, Ron agreed, looking troubled. My dad always said Dumbledore was the greatest wizard since Merlin. Can't believe he'd do something like that. Believe it, Harry said grimly. I remembered it clear as day. And apparently, there's a connection between my elemental nature and why Voldemort came after me as a baby. Hagrid started to tell me something about it, but Dumbledore made him forget too. Hermione bit her lip, clearly disturbed by these revelations. The question is what we do now. These memory charms are breaking down whether Dumbledore wants them to or not. You need proper training in controlling your abilities. Yeah, but who's going to teach me? Harry asked. According to everyone, elemental wizards are incredibly rare. There hasn't been a confirmed case in centuries. What about Professor Flitwick? Hermione suggested. He's a charms master. Even if he can't teach elemental magic specifically, he might know techniques for magical control. Or McGonagall, Ron offered. She seems decent, and she might be pretty brassed off at Dumbledore for messing with her memory. Harry considered these suggestions. Maybe. But I need to be careful who I trust. Dumbledore's been manipulating a lot of people for a long time. They lapsed into thoughtful silence, broken eventually by Ron. So, what's it feel like? The elemental stuff? Harry flexed his fingers, watching the golden light swirl beneath his skin. It's hard to describe. Like there's this enormous power inside me that's been trapped for years, and now it's finally breaking free. It responds to my emotions, anger makes it flare up, like when I was talking to Dumbledore earlier. Things around me started shaking. That explains the windows, Hermione noted. In the Great Hall, when you collapsed. Harry nodded. Snape keeps warning me to control my emotions, but it's not easy when I keep discovering that my entire life has been manipulated. You need to learn meditation, Hermione decided, already reaching for one of her books. There's a whole chapter here on mental disciplines for magical control. It might help with the emotional triggers. As she flipped through the book, Ron leaned closer to Harry. What about the sorting hat? He asked quietly. It put you in Gryffindor after all this, but, did it say anything else? You know, privately. Harry hesitated. He hadn't told anyone about the hat's initial suggestion of Slytherin, and now didn't seem the time to bring it up. Just that my elemental nature made me unusual. That I had qualities of all four houses, but Gryffindor would be best for my transitional period. Before Ron could ask more questions, the hospital wing doors opened again. This time, it was Professor McGonagall who entered, her expression unusually grim. "Mr. Potter," she acknowledged with a nod. "Miss Granger, Mr. Weasley." "Professor," they chorused. McGonagall approached Harry's bed, her sharp eyes taking in the golden light flowing beneath his skin. "How are you feeling after this morning's procedures?" "Better," Harry replied cautiously. "Though I've had some troubling memories return." Something flickered in McGonagall's eyes. "Yes, Madame Pomfrey informed me. Including, I understand, a memory of my visit to Privet Drive when you were 9 years old." Harry nodded, watching her carefully. "You saw the cupboard. You were angry about how the Dursleys treated me. And then Albus arrived and altered my recollection of events." Her Scottish brogue became more pronounced, a sign of her anger. "A fact he has now confirmed to me, much to my displeasure." "You didn't know?" Hermione asked, sounding surprised. "I did not, Miss Granger." McGonagall's lips pressed into a thin line. "Had I remembered what I saw that day, I assure you I would not have allowed Mr. Potter to remain in such conditions." Harry believed her. Despite her stern demeanor, McGonagall had always struck him as fundamentally fair. "So what happens now?" he asked. McGonagall glanced toward Pomfrey's closed office door before answering. "That, Mr. Potter, is a complex question. Your medical treatment must continue, of course. But beyond that..." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Recent revelations have caused me to question certain decisions made on your behalf. As your head of house, I have a responsibility to your welfare that I intend to take most seriously. Does that mean you'll help me understand what's happening to me?" Harry pressed. "Help me learn to control this?" He held up his hand, where the golden light pulsed visibly. "To the best of my ability, yes." McGonagall's expression softened slightly. "Though I must warn you, my knowledge of elemental magic is largely theoretical. True elemental wizards are exceedingly rare." "That's what everyone keeps saying," Harry said, frustration creeping into his voice. "But if Dumbledore knew what I was from the beginning, why didn't he prepare proper training for me instead of just suppressing my abilities?" McGonagall's hesitation was telling. "The headmaster's methods can be unconventional. He tends to work toward long-term goals that are not always apparent to others. Or he just wants to control everything," Ron muttered, earning a sharp look from McGonagall. "Regardless," she continued, "we must address your immediate needs. The headmaster has reluctantly agreed that your elemental abilities require specialized training, given that they are now emerging whether we're prepared or not." "Reluctantly?" Harry caught the word immediately. "He still thinks my abilities should be suppressed?" "He believes they should be carefully managed," McGonagall corrected diplomatically. "However, he has conceded that suppression is no longer viable, given the rapid breakdown of the memory charms." Before Harry could respond, Pomfrey emerged from her office. "Minerva, good. I was about to send for you. We have a situation developing." Her grave tone immediately put everyone on alert. "What kind of situation?" McGonagall asked sharply. Pomfrey gestured toward her office. "A representative from the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes has arrived. Apparently, the magical surge from Mr. Potter's collapse registered on their monitoring equipment. They're demanding to examine him." Harry felt a chill run through him. "The Ministry knows about me?" "They know something unusual occurred," Pomfrey clarified. "But they don't yet know the specifics of your condition." "And they won't," McGonagall said firmly. "Mr. Potter is a minor student under Hogwarts protection. Any examination would require guardian consent, which I doubt those muggles would provide even if we asked them." "Which is precisely what I told the representative," Pomfrey agreed. "However, they're being quite insistent. They've mentioned something about potentially dangerous magical anomalies and public safety concerns." Harry's heart sank. Just what he needed, more people viewing him as something abnormal, something to be feared or controlled. "I shall handle this," McGonagall declared, straightening her already impeccable robes. "Mr. Potter is recovering from magical exhaustion. Any further details are protected by healer-patient confidentiality." As she strode toward Pomfrey's office, Hermione leaned closer to Harry. "This could get complicated," she whispered. "The Ministry has regulatory authority over unusual magical manifestations, especially those deemed potentially dangerous to the public." "Great," Harry muttered. "So now I've got Dumbledore trying to control me on one side and the Ministry getting interested on the other." "Not just the Ministry," Ron added grimly. "If word gets out about your elemental abilities, all sorts of people will take an interest. Including some you definitely don't want attention from." Harry understood his implication immediately. Death Eaters. Voldemort supporters. Ron flinched at the name but nodded. "Dad says some of them got off by claiming they were under the Imperius curse. But they'd definitely want to know about someone with your kind of power." The implications were disturbing. Harry had barely begun to process the existence of his elemental abilities, and already multiple factions seemed poised to either control or exploit him. Before he could dwell on this further, the door to Pomfrey's office opened. McGonagall emerged, followed by a thin wizard in formal ministry robes who looked distinctly annoyed. "As I've explained, Mr. Wimple," McGonagall was saying with iron politeness, "Hogwarts takes the medical privacy of its students very seriously. Mr. Potter is receiving appropriate care for a case of magical exhaustion triggered by his transition from a muggle to magical environment." The ministry wizard, Wimple, apparently, did not look convinced. "Magical exhaustion doesn't register as a Class 3 anomaly on our detection equipment, Professor McGonagall. Our records indicate the largest magical surge detected at Hogwarts since you-know-who's attack on the Potters themselves." His gaze fixed on Harry, widening slightly at the sight of the golden light flowing beneath his skin. "And that is certainly not a symptom of standard magical exhaustion." Pomfrey stepped between Wimple and Harry's bed. "Mr. Potter's condition has unique aspects due to his personal history, which remains confidential. I have submitted the appropriate medical documentation to St. Mungo's, who will liaise with your department as necessary." "The minister will hear about this," Wimple warned, though he seemed to realize he wasn't going to get further. Unusual magical manifestations are a ministry concern, particularly when they involve individuals of special interest. With a last, lingering look at Harry, he departed, his formal robes swishing dramatically. "That," McGonagall said dryly once the doors had closed, "was a complication we could have done without." "Will he be back?" Harry asked anxiously. "Almost certainly," McGonagall confirmed. "Likely with reinforcements and more official documentation next time. The ministry rarely lets go once it takes an interest in something, or someone." "Great," Harry muttered. "More people trying to control me." "Not necessarily, Mr. Potter." McGonagall's tone softened slightly. "The ministry's interest, while inconvenient, might provide certain checks and balances against other influences in your life." Harry caught her meaning immediately. "You mean Dumbledore?" McGonagall didn't confirm or deny this directly. "I mean that your situation is unique and complex. Multiple perspectives may ultimately be beneficial, provided your well-being remains the central concern." Before their conversation could continue, the hospital wing doors opened yet again. This time, it was Professor Snape who entered, carrying a tray of potion vials. "Right on schedule," Pomfrey noted, checking her watch. "We need to proceed with the next phase of treatment." "Indeed," Snape agreed, setting down the potions. His dark gaze swept over the gathered students. "I see Mr. Potter has acquired his usual entourage. Perhaps they might continue their social visit elsewhere while we attend to medical matters." "Actually, Professor," Harry said quickly, "I'd like them to stay. If that's possible." Snape's expression soured, but Pomfrey nodded. "Emotional support can be beneficial during difficult medical procedures." They may remain, provided they stay out of the way and maintain a calm environment. McGonagall nodded. Very well. I shall return later to check on your progress, Mr. Potter. In the meantime, consider what we discussed about specialized training. Once you're medically stable, we can begin exploring appropriate methods. After she departed, Pomfrey began preparing for the next round of charm removals. This session will focus on charms from your middle childhood, ages 6 to 8. Based on this morning's results, we can expect more significant memory recovery and possibly increased magical instability. Harry nodded, mentally bracing himself. I'm ready. Ron and Hermione moved to chairs against the wall, giving the medical team space to work while remaining visible to Harry for moral support. Remember, Pomfrey instructed as she raised her wand, let the memories flow naturally. Don't fight them, even if they're disturbing. The familiar tugging sensation began as she started the incantation. A silver blue thread emerged from Harry's temple, bringing with it a flood of memories, age 7. The school library had become his sanctuary, the one place Dudley never bothered to look for him. He'd discovered a book on meditation, fascinated by the idea of controlling one's mind and emotions. For weeks he practiced in the quiet corners of his cupboard, and gradually began to sense something within himself, a pool of energy, vast and waiting. He learned to draw upon it when needed. When Aunt Petunia cut his hair and it grew back overnight. When the ugly sweater she tried to force over his head shrank to doll size. When the hunger pains were too much, and somehow his scraps became more filling. Then the strange incidents around the neighborhood began. Lights flickering when he walked past. Water from broken pipes diverting around him during a rainstorm. A bully's shoelaces tying themselves together when he approached Harry. His secret joy in these small victories. The careful experiments in his cupboard, learning to make small objects float, to create tiny balls of golden light to read by after the Dursleys had turned out his light. Then Dumbledore's midnight visit. Impressive control for one so young, he'd murmured, studying Harry with calculating eyes. Too impressive, perhaps. We must keep you humble, Harry. Pride before the fall, you know. Another flash of light. Harry gasped as the memory settled into place, more complex and detailed than the previous fragments. I was teaching myself, he said, his voice filled with wonder and anger. Even without knowing about magic, I found it on my own. I was learning to control it. Extraordinary, Pomfrey murmured, examining the extracted charm. Self-discovered elemental manipulation at age 7, without any formal instruction. Even among historical accounts of elemental wizards, that's remarkable. Snape's expression remained neutral, but his dark eyes studied Harry with new intensity. The headmaster truly feared your potential, it seems. Or he had other plans for it, Harry countered. Plans that required me to develop in specific ways, not naturally. Before Snape could respond, Pomfrey was already moving to remove the next charm. Another silver blue thread emerged, another flood of memories, age 8. School reports describing him as unusually bright, despite his efforts to hide his intelligence after seeing how the Dursleys reacted to him outperforming Dudley. Finding advanced books in the library, physics, chemistry, mathematics, and devouring them in secret. Making connections between what he read and the strange abilities he possessed. Testing theories methodically. Discovering that his power responded to intent and visualization. Creating increasingly complex mental models to control his abilities. The day he realized he could feel other people's magic, a strange old woman in the grocery store who always wore bizarre clothes, a man on the bus with a hidden wand, the protective barriers around Privet Drive itself. And then Dumbledore again, appearing in his cupboard, face grave with concern. You continue to exceed expectations, Harry. But the time is not yet right. Patience, my boy. All will be revealed when you're ready. Another flash of light, another gap in his memories and abilities. I could sense magic, Harry said as the memory solidified. I could feel the wards around Privet Drive. I could identify wizards and witches by their magical signatures. Magical sensitivity, Snape identified. A rare ability even among fully trained wizards, and virtually unheard of in untrained children. These memories suggest Mr. Potter was developing at an extraordinary rate, Pomfrey observed, studying the diagnostic display. Far beyond what would be expected even for a naturally powerful wizard child. And Dumbledore kept shutting it down, Harry said bitterly. Every time I made progress, every time I discovered something new about my abilities, he'd show up and take it away. The pattern is concerning, Pomfrey agreed. These weren't simply memory modifications for your protection, Mr. Potter. They were systematic suppressions of your natural magical development. Snape's expression remained unreadable, but something in his posture had shifted. One more charm to remove today, he suggested to Pomfrey. She nodded, already preparing for the final extraction. This one appears particularly complex. It may cause more significant disorientation than the others. As she began the incantation, Harry felt a sharper tugging sensation, as if this memory were more deeply embedded. The silver-blue thread that emerged was thicker, pulsing with a strange intensity. As it separated from his mind, a wave of dizziness swept over him, followed by a flood of memories more vivid than any before. The Dursleys had gone to London for the day, leaving him with Mrs. Figg as usual. But Mrs. Figg had fallen asleep, and Harry had wandered into her basement, drawn by a strange prickling sensation at the edge of his awareness. There, hidden behind old boxes, he'd found a trunk filled with magical items, moving photographs, old potion bottles, a broken wand. And books, magical books with moving illustrations. One in particular had called to him, Elemental Theory, a practical approach to natural magic. He'd taken the book, knowing instinctively it was meant for him. For weeks he studied it in secret, practicing the techniques it described. Learning to channel his power through the elements, creating tiny flames that danced across his palm without burning, making droplets of water float and form shapes in the air, feeling the whisper of wind respond to his call even indoors. But most importantly, he'd learned about his golden light. The book called it raw magical essence, the purest form of magical energy, which only the most powerful elemental wizards could access directly. He'd practiced diligently, gaining more control each day. The book warned about emotional triggers, anger, fear, joy, and taught techniques to maintain balance regardless of external circumstances. He'd mastered the first-level exercises quickly, moving on to more complex manipulations. Then one night, as he practiced creating a sphere of golden light in his cupboard, the door had burst open. Uncle Vernon stood there, face purple with rage at the unearthly glow. "What freakishness is this?" he bellowed, grabbing for Harry. Startled, Harry had lost control. The golden sphere had expanded explosively, throwing Vernon back against the opposite wall with enough force to crack the plaster. Petunia's screams. Dudley's blubbering. Vernon's threats as he staggered to his feet. Then an unexpected visitor, not Dumbledore this time, but a tall, severe-looking man with long white blonde hair and cold grey eyes. "Obliviate," he'd said calmly, pointing a snake-headed cane at the Dursleys. Then turning to Harry with calculating interest. "Well, well. The rumors appear to be true after all. How fascinating." The man kneeling beside him, studying him intently. "Tell me, Harry Potter, how long have you been able to manifest raw magical essence? This golden light?" Harry, wary but somehow knowing this man was like him, a wizard. "A few months. I found a book." "Remarkable," the man had murmured. "And with no formal training. The Dark Lord was right to fear you." Then footsteps on the front path. The man tensing. "It seems we have company. Until we meet again, Mr. Potter." Obliviate. Another flash of light, but different, colder, harsher. Then Dumbledore bursting in, face thunderous as he surveyed the scene. The blond man gone without a trace. The Dursleys unconscious on the floor. Harry, confused and frightened, the golden light still flickering beneath his skin. "This is most unfortunate," Dumbledore had said grimly. It seems our precautions were insufficient. Memory charms alone won't suffice any longer. He'd raised his wand, but this time the spell felt different, heavier, more invasive. Not just hiding memories but binding something essential deep within Harry. The golden light fading, a cold emptiness taking its place. "Forgive me, Harry," Dumbledore had murmured as darkness closed in. "But some powers are too dangerous to be left unchecked. In time, you'll understand." Harry emerged from the memory gasping, his heart racing. The golden light beneath his skin flared wildly, causing objects around the room to rattle and shake. "Potter!" Snape snapped. "Control yourself." But Harry was too lost in the implications of what he'd just remembered. "Lucius Malfoy," he whispered. "It was Lucius Malfoy. He found me after I lost control. He knew what I was. He said, the Dark Lord was right to fear me." Snape went very still, his already pale face widening further. "You're certain it was Lucius Malfoy?" Tall, long blonde hair, snake-headed cane. Harry nodded. "He memory charmed the Dursleys. He was going to take me somewhere, I think, but Dumbledore arrived." "This is most disturbing," Pomfrey said, studying the extracted charm with grave concern. "This charm is different from the others, more complex, more invasive. Not just a memory modification but a direct binding of your elemental abilities." "Dumbledore said memory charms wouldn't be enough anymore," Harry recalled. "That, some powers are too dangerous to be left unchecked." From their chairs against the wall, Ron and Hermione exchanged alarmed glances. "Blimey," Ron muttered. "Lucius Malfoy is bad news, Harry. He was a Death Eater who claimed he was under the Imperius curse after you-know-who fell. Dad says he's still dangerous, has the Minister in his pocket. And he knows about Harry's elemental abilities," Hermione added worriedly. "At least, he knew years ago, before Dumbledore obliviated him." Assuming the charm was effective, Snape interjected, his tone carefully neutral. "Lucius Malfoy is resistant to certain magical influences." Harry looked up sharply. "You think he might remember? Even after Dumbledore's memory charm?" "It's possible," Snape acknowledged. "Particularly if he took precautions afterward, such as reviewing the memory in a pensieve before it could fade completely. And if his son is at Hogwarts now." Harry didn't need to finish the thought. "Draco may have been instructed to watch you," Snape confirmed. Though he would not know the specific reason for his father's interest. Harry's mind raced with the implications. Not only had Dumbledore been systematically suppressing his abilities for years, but now it seemed Death Eaters, or at least one powerful former Death Eater, might have known about his elemental nature all along. "This complicates matters," Pomfrey said, understating the situation dramatically. "Mr. Potter's medical condition is now entangled with potentially serious political and security concerns. Not to mention the Ministry's growing interest," Harry added glumly. Snape's dark eyes fixed on him with unusual intensity. "This is precisely why control is essential, Potter. Your power makes you a target for multiple factions who would use you for their own ends. The Headmaster, the Ministry, the Dark Lord's former supporters, all will seek to influence or control what you're becoming. So what am I supposed to do?" Harry demanded, frustration evident in his voice. "Just keep letting everyone else decide my fate?" "No," Snape replied, surprising everyone with his directness. "You must become skilled enough that none of them can control you against your will. Master your abilities before others can master you." The blunt advice hung in the air, oddly compelling coming from the typically antagonistic potions master. "How?" Harry asked simply. "Everyone keeps saying elemental wizards are rare. There's no one to teach me." "There are alternatives to direct instruction," Snape said carefully. "Historical texts. Theoretical approaches that might be adapted. Certain mental disciplines that apply across magical disciplines." "Occlumency," Hermione suggested suddenly. "I read about it in one of the advanced books. It's the art of protecting the mind against external penetration. Wouldn't that help Harry resist further memory charms? Snape's eyebrows rose slightly. An astute observation, Miss Granger. Yes, a clemency would indeed provide some protection against further mental interference. It also has the beneficial side effect of improving emotional control, which would help manage Mr. Potter's elemental outbursts. Can you teach me? Harry asked directly. A complex series of emotions flickered across Snape's face too quickly to interpret. That, he said finally, would require careful consideration. A clemency training involves a certain level of mental intimacy that would be challenging given our respective histories. Before Harry could press further, the diagnostic display above his bed began pulsing urgently. The golden tendrils of his elemental magic were pushing more aggressively against the remaining bindings, causing fractures to spread rapidly. His core is destabilizing again, Pomfrey announced, already reaching for emergency potions. The removal of these deeper charms has accelerated the breakdown process significantly. Snape moved swiftly, administering a stabilizing draft while Pomfrey cast containment charms around Harry's bed. The golden light beneath Harry's skin had intensified to a brilliant glow that illuminated the entire hospital wing. What's happening to me? Harry gasped, feeling a strange pressure building in his chest. Your elemental nature is asserting itself more forcefully, Pomfrey explained, monitoring the diagnostic display with growing concern. The deeper binding charms we removed were holding back more than just memories, they were suppressing your core abilities directly. Can't you stop it? Hermione asked anxiously, watching as objects around the room began to vibrate in response to Harry's magical fluctuations. To attempt suppression now would likely cause catastrophic backlash, Snape replied, his tone clinical despite the urgency of the situation. The process must run its course. Harry felt as if something massive were expanding inside him, seeking release. The pressure was painful now, a burning sensation that spread from his chest to his extremities. The golden light pulsed in time with his racing heartbeat. It hurts, he managed through clenched teeth. Focus on your breathing, Pomfrey instructed. Try to direct the energy flow rather than fighting it. Harry closed his eyes, attempting to follow her advice. He visualized the golden energy flowing smoothly rather than erupting chaotically. To his surprise, the visualization seemed to help, the painful pressure eased slightly, becoming more manageable. Good, Snape commented, observing the subtle change in the diagnostic display. Your intent affects the manifestation. Direct it purposefully. Drawing on the meditation techniques he'd learned as a child, and subsequently forgotten until now, Harry focused on creating a mental pathway for the surging energy. He imagined it circulating through his body in a controlled pattern rather than building toward explosion. Gradually, the violent vibration of objects around the room subsided. The golden light still flowed visibly beneath his skin, but with a steadier, more rhythmic pulse. Remarkable, Pomfrey murmured, studying the diagnostic display. He's instinctively establishing new pathways for his magic to flow, bypassing the remaining bindings. The memories, Harry realized suddenly. The techniques I learned from that book in Mrs. Figg's basement, they're coming back. I can remember how to direct the energy. Mrs. Figg? Ron looked confused. Isn't she the cat lady you mentioned, the one who watched you sometimes? Harry nodded, still focusing on maintaining the energy flow. She's a squib. I found magical books in her basement, including one on elemental magic. That's how I first learned to control these abilities before Dumbledore suppressed them again. A book on elemental magic in Arabella Figg's possession? Snape's voice held rare surprise. That is, unlikely to be coincidental. You think Dumbledore planted it? Harry asked, opening his eyes as the immediate crisis seemed to pass. Or used it to monitor your development, Snape suggested. Arabella Figg has been Dumbledore's eyes and ears in your neighborhood for years. This new revelation shouldn't have surprised Harry, given everything else he'd learned, but somehow it still stung. So even my discovery of my abilities was orchestrated? Perhaps, Snape allowed. Or perhaps the book found its way to you through other means. Not all forces at work in your life have been under the headmaster's control. Before Harry could ponder this cryptic statement, the hospital wing doors burst open to admit Dumbledore himself, his expression grave as he took in the scene. "I felt the magical surge from my office," he said without preamble. "What's happened?" "We removed several significant binding charms," Pomfrey explained, her tone professional but cool. "Including one involving an encounter with Lucius Malfoy when Mr. Potter was 8 years old." Dumbledore went very still. "I see. And how much does Harry remember of that incident?" "Everything," Harry replied, meeting the headmaster's gaze directly. "Including how you placed a binding charm on my elemental abilities after Malfoy left, saying some powers were too dangerous to be left unchecked." Something flickered in Dumbledore's blue eyes, concern, perhaps, or possibly calculation. "That was a difficult night," he said carefully. "Lucius Malfoy's interest in you presented a significant security risk. The binding was necessary to prevent him from detecting your abilities should he find a way to circumvent the memory charm." "And the other bindings?" Harry challenged. "The ones you placed every time I started to discover my abilities on my own? Were those for my security too?" Dumbledore sighed heavily. "Harry, I understand your anger. From your perspective, it must seem I've deliberately hindered your development. But elemental magic is unpredictable and potentially catastrophic when untrained. The bindings were meant to protect both you and those around you until you were ready for proper instruction." "And when exactly were you planning to decide I was ready?" Harry demanded, the golden light pulsing brighter beneath his skin. "After Voldemort returned? After more people died? Or were you never going to let me access my full abilities?" "Of course I intended to remove the bindings eventually," Dumbledore assured him, though something in his tone rang false. "But gradually, carefully, with appropriate guidance at each stage. Like the guidance you provided by leaving me ignorant and defenseless with people who hated magic." Harry's voice rose, and with it, the objects around the room began to vibrate again. "Or the guidance of erasing my memory every time I showed too much potential." "Potter," Snape warned quietly. "Your control." Harry took a deep breath, forcing the anger back. The vibration subsided, though the golden light continued to pulse intensely. "I believe," Pomfrey interjected firmly, "that this conversation is becoming detrimental to my patient's stability. Headmaster, unless you have specific medical information to contribute, I must ask you to return later when Mr. Potter is more fully recovered." For a moment, it seemed Dumbledore might object. His aged face revealed a complex mixture of emotions, concern, frustration, and something that might have been fear. Finally, he nodded. "Of course, Poppy. Harry's well-being must come first." He turned to Harry, his expression grave. "We will speak again when you're feeling better. There is much I need to explain, about your abilities, about the prophecy, about the choices I've made. I ask only that you reserve judgment until you've heard the full explanation." After he departed, a heavy silence fell over the hospital wing. Harry stared at his hands, watching the golden light flow beneath his skin and trying to process the implications of his recovered memories. "He's lying," he said finally, looking up at Snape and Pomfrey. "Or at least, not telling the whole truth. There's something more about why he suppressed my abilities, something he's still hiding." "Undoubtedly," Snape agreed, his tone neutral but his dark eyes calculating. "The question is what, and why. And whether it's for your protection or his own," Hermione added quietly from her position against the wall. Harry considered this unsettling possibility. Could Dumbledore's actions have been motivated by something other than Harry's best interests? By fear, perhaps, of what Harry might become if allowed to develop naturally. "I need to learn more," he decided. "About elemental magic, about what happened the night my parents died, about why Voldemort really came after me. There's something bigger here than just a prophecy." "A prudent approach," Snape acknowledged. "Though I would caution against pursuing such information too openly. The headmaster is not the only one with an interest in your development. Harry nodded, understanding the warning. Between Dumbledore, the Ministry, and Lucius Malfoy, he was surrounded by people with their own agendas regarding his emerging abilities. "What about the remaining memory charms?" he asked Pomfrey. "There are still dozens left." She studied the diagnostic display thoughtfully. "The process has changed now. Your core is actively dismantling the remaining charms on its own. We could continue with targeted removals, but at this point, it might be safer to let your magic handle the process naturally, with medical supervision to prevent any dangerous surges." "How long will it take?" "Impossible to say precisely. Days, perhaps weeks, depending on how quickly your system can integrate the returning memories and abilities. The most critical period will be when the foundation charms begin to break down, those placed immediately after your parents' deaths." Harry nodded, absorbing this. "And in the meantime? I can't stay in the hospital wing forever." "No indeed," Pomfrey agreed. "Once your condition stabilizes from today's procedures, likely by tomorrow morning, you can begin attending classes, with certain precautions. Regular check-ins here, of course, and perhaps modified magical practice until you gain better control. I shall inform your teachers of the necessary accommodations," Snape added, surprising Harry with this practical support. "Though not, perhaps, the full details of your condition. Magical recovery should suffice for most." "Thank you," Harry said, genuinely grateful despite his lingering suspicion of Snape's motives. As the adults continued discussing medical details, Ron moved closer to Harry's bed. "Mental, isn't it?" he said quietly. "Yesterday you were just Harry Potter, the boy who lived. Now you're an elemental wizard with 52 memory charms, Dumbledore manipulating your whole life, and my dad's least favorite person taking an interest in you." Put that way, the situation did sound rather overwhelming. Yet strangely, Harry felt more certain of his path now than he had yesterday. "At least I'm finally learning the truth," he replied. "And remembering who I really am, not who Dumbledore decided I should be." "We'll help," Ron promised, with Hermione nodding firmly beside him. "Whatever you need." Harry smiled, a genuine warmth spreading through him that had nothing to do with elemental magic. Whatever challenges lay ahead, at least he wouldn't face them alone. The next morning found Harry sitting on the edge of his hospital bed, fully dressed in his new Gryffindor robes, waiting for Madame Pomfrey's final assessment before attending his first classes at Hogwarts. The night had brought more recovered memories as additional charms weakened and broke down. Most were fragmentary, flashes of accidental magic throughout his childhood, moments of connection with his elemental abilities swiftly followed by Dumbledore's interventions. Each recovery strengthened his understanding of what had been taken from him, fueling a quiet determination to reclaim his true potential. The golden light still flowed visibly beneath his skin, though less intensely than the previous day. He'd spent hours practicing the meditation techniques that had returned to his memory, learning once again to direct and control the energy flow. "Well, Mr. Potter," Pomfrey said, completing her diagnostic charms, "your condition has stabilized remarkably well overnight. Your core is establishing new pathways around the remaining bindings, and the spontaneous memory recoveries seem to be proceeding without dangerous magical surges. So I can go to classes?" Harry asked hopefully. "Yes, with certain conditions." She handed him a small silver device that resembled a pocket watch. "This will monitor your magical stability throughout the day. If it begins to glow red, you are to return here immediately, no matter what class you're in." "Understood." Harry nodded, tucking the monitor into his pocket. "Additionally," she continued, "you are to avoid casting any spells without direct supervision from a professor who has been briefed on your condition. Your magic is still highly unstable, and standard spellcasting could trigger unexpected reactions." "What about potions?" Harry asked. "That doesn't require actual spellcasting, right? Potions should be manageable, though Professor Snape has been advised to assign you a partner for practical work." Her lips twitched slightly. "I believe Miss Granger has volunteered." Harry smiled, unsurprised by Hermione's initiative. Anything else? Yes. Pomfrey's expression grew more serious. You are to avoid any strong emotional situations if possible. Anger, fear, extreme excitement, all can trigger elemental manifestations while your control is still developing. That might be difficult in a school full of teenagers, Harry pointed out. Indeed. Which is why Professor McGonagall has arranged for you to have access to a private room adjacent to Gryffindor Tower for meditation and practice. The standard dormitory might prove problematic if you experience a nighttime surge. Harry imagined accidentally causing his roommates' beds to levitate during a bad dream and winced. Probably a good idea. One final thing. Pomfrey reached into her desk and withdrew a familiar-looking book with a worn leather cover. This was found in your relative's home during a recent inspection. I believe it belongs to you. Harry recognized it instantly, the book on elemental magic he'd discovered in Mrs. Figg's basement 3 years earlier. How did you get this? Professor McGonagall made a discreet visit to Privet Drive yesterday, ostensibly to collect some of your personal belongings. She found this hidden beneath a loose floorboard in your room. Harry took the book reverently. Despite Dumbledore's memory charm, some part of him must have known the book's importance, must have hidden it for safekeeping. Thank you, he said, running his fingers over the embossed title, Elemental Theory, a Practical Approach to Natural Magic. You're welcome. Now, Professor McGonagall is waiting outside to escort you to breakfast and help manage what will undoubtedly be an interesting return to the student body. Harry had been so focused on his medical situation that he'd almost forgotten about his fellow students. News of his collapse during the sorting and subsequent hospitalization had surely spread throughout the school. His reappearance, especially with golden light visibly flowing beneath his skin, would cause quite a stir. Ready to face the masses? McGonagall asked when he emerged from the hospital wing. Not really, Harry admitted. But I guess I don't have much choice. McGonagall's expression softened slightly. The attention will be uncomfortable, I'm afraid. However, Professor Dumbledore has addressed the school regarding your condition, or a version of it, at least. The official explanation is that you experienced a delayed magical reaction to the trauma you suffered as an infant, which is now being properly treated. And the glowing? Harry held up his hand, where the golden light remained visible beneath his skin. A temporary side effect of the treatment, McGonagall replied. Not entirely false, if not the complete truth. As they walked through the corridors toward the Great Hall, Harry felt the weight of curious stares from portraits and passing students alike. Whispers followed in their wake, growing in volume as they approached the entrance to the Great Hall. Remember, McGonagall said quietly, you are a Gryffindor, Mr. Potter. Courage does not mean an absence of fear, but rather facing that fear with dignity. With those words of encouragement, she pushed open the doors. Conversation died immediately as hundreds of heads turned in their direction. Harry felt his chest tighten with anxiety, the golden light brightening in response to his emotions. Calm, McGonagall murmured. Breathe. Find your center. Harry drew on his newly recovered meditation techniques, visualizing his energy settling into a controlled flow rather than a reactive flare. The light dimmed to its normal intensity, and he stepped forward with as much confidence as he could muster. The silence gave way to an explosion of whispers as he made his way to the Gryffindor table, where Ron and Hermione had saved him a seat. He kept his eyes forward, ignoring the pointing and staring from all directions. Morning, he said as casually as possible, sliding onto the bench beside Ron. Morning, Ron replied with forced nonchalance, though his eyes sparkled with suppressed excitement. Sleep all right? Well enough. Harry reached for a piece of toast, acutely aware that his every movement was being scrutinized by curious onlookers. What's first today? Transfiguration with Professor McGonagall, Hermione answered, sliding his schedule across the table. Then double potions with the Slytherins. Harry groaned internally. Potions with Snape and the Slytherins, including Draco Malfoy, whose father had apparently known about Harry's elemental abilities for years, seemed like a recipe for exactly the kind of emotional provocation Pomfrey had warned him to avoid. "Great," he muttered, taking a bite of toast. "Everyone's staring," Ron observed unnecessarily. "The glowing's a bit obvious, mate." "Really?" "I hadn't noticed," Harry replied dryly. Before their conversation could continue, a familiar drawling voice came from behind them. "Well, well. Potter's finally emerged from the hospital wing. Still glowing, I see. Going for a more dramatic version of famous, are we?" Harry turned to find Draco Malfoy standing there, flanked by his ever-present cronies Crabbe and Goyle. Despite Pomfrey's warnings about emotional control, Harry couldn't help the surge of suspicion that rose within him as he looked at Lucius Malfoy's son. "Just a side effect, Malfoy," he replied evenly. "Nothing to worry about." Malfoy's pale eyes fixed on the golden light visible beneath Harry's skin, his expression a mixture of curiosity and calculation. "Father mentioned you might be unusual, Potter." "I see he wasn't exaggerating." The casual reference to Lucius Malfoy sent a chill down Harry's spine. Was it possible the elder Malfoy remembered their encounter after all, despite Dumbledore's memory charm? Did he? Harry kept his tone neutral while studying Malfoy more carefully. "What else did your father mention about me?" Something flickered in Malfoy's eyes, uncertainty, perhaps. "Just that I should pay attention to what you're capable of." "Seems good advice, given your illuminating condition." Before Harry could respond, Professor McGonagall appeared beside them. "Mr. Malfoy, I believe the Slytherin table is in the opposite direction. Mr. Potter needs to finish his breakfast before classes begin." Malfoy gave Harry one last, calculating look before departing with a smirk. "See you in potions, Potter." Once he was out of earshot, Ron leaned forward. "That was weird. Think his dad really remembers you?" "I don't know," Harry replied quietly. "But he definitely told Draco to watch me." "That could be just general interest in the boy who lived," Hermione suggested. "Not necessarily because he remembers your elemental abilities." "Maybe," Harry allowed, though he wasn't convinced. "Either way, I'll need to be careful around him." "Around everyone, really," Hermione pointed out pragmatically. "Until you have better control of your abilities, any strong emotion could trigger a manifestation." Harry nodded, understanding the challenge ahead. He would need to maintain iron control over his emotions while attending classes in an entirely new magical environment, all while his mind continued to recover suppressed memories and abilities. And that didn't even account for the various factions taking interest in his condition, Dumbledore, the Ministry, and potentially the Malfoys. One day at a time, he told himself firmly. Starting with Transfiguration. Professor McGonagall's classroom fell silent as Harry entered, golden light visibly flowing beneath his skin. He kept his eyes forward, ignoring the whispers and stares as he took a seat between Ron and Hermione. McGonagall cleared her throat, drawing the class's attention. "Today we will begin practical work on the match-to-needle transfiguration introduced in yesterday's lecture. However, before we begin, I must establish certain safety protocols." Her sharp gaze swept over the class. Transfiguration requires precise magical control. Any disruptions or distractions could lead to dangerous mistakes. Therefore, I expect complete focus and proper decorum from each of you. Her eyes lingered meaningfully on Harry for a moment before she continued. "Mr. Potter, due to your ongoing medical treatment, you will observe today rather than perform the practical exercise. Miss Granger will demonstrate the technique for your benefit." Harry nodded, both relieved and disappointed. While he was eager to begin practical magic, he understood the precaution given his unstable core. As the lesson proceeded, Harry watched Hermione successfully transfigure her match into a perfect needle on her third attempt, earning Gryffindor 5 points. Ron struggled more visibly, his match growing silver but retaining its shape. Harry found himself instinctively analyzing the magical process, drawing on his recovered memories of energy manipulation. He could almost sense the transformation matrices McGonagall had described in her lecture, could visualize how the magical energy should flow to reshape the object's fundamental properties. "Mr. Potter," McGonagall said, pausing beside his desk. "You seem quite intent for someone who is merely observing." "Sorry, Professor. I was just thinking about the process." "Indeed?" She raised an eyebrow. "And what conclusions have you drawn?" Harry hesitated, unsure how much to reveal about his returning understanding of magical theory. "Well, it seems like the key is visualizing not just the physical change but the essential nature of the object. You're not just changing its appearance but its fundamental properties." McGonagall looked momentarily surprised. "That is a remarkably astute observation for a first year with no formal magical education. 5 points to Gryffindor for theoretical insight." As she moved on to help another student, Hermione leaned closer. "How did you know that?" she whispered. "That's advanced transfiguration theory, it's not even in our first-year textbook." Harry shrugged uncomfortably. "It just seemed logical. I can kind of sense the magical process. Another side effect of your elemental abilities emerging," she guessed. "Maybe," Harry agreed. "Or maybe knowledge I once had that was suppressed along with my memories." The remainder of the lesson passed without incident, though Harry found himself growing increasingly aware of the magical energies flowing around the classroom. He could sense the distinct signature of McGonagall's power as she demonstrated the spell, could feel the varied attempts of his classmates as they practiced, could even detect the subtle enchantments embedded in the classroom itself. By the time the bell rang, he had developed a mild headache from the sensory input, the golden light beneath his skin pulsing a bit more intensely than before. "You all right, mate?" Ron asked as they gathered their things. "You're looking a bit brighter." "Just tired," Harry replied, rubbing his temples. "I can feel everyone's magic. It's a bit overwhelming." McGonagall, overhearing this, approached with concern. "Mr. Potter, is your monitoring device showing any warning signs?" Harry checked the silver instrument in his pocket. It remained a steady silver, showing no signs of the red glow that would indicate danger. "It's fine, Professor. Just a headache." McGonagall studied him for a moment before nodding. "Very well. But if it worsens, go directly to Madame Pomfrey, regardless of your scheduled classes." As they headed toward the dungeons for potions, Harry braced himself for what promised to be a more challenging experience. Snape had been surprisingly helpful regarding his medical condition, but Harry harbored no illusions that this would translate to classroom favoritism. "Just try to stay calm," Hermione advised as they descended the stone steps. "Don't let Snape or the Slytherins provoke you." "Easier said than done," Harry muttered, already feeling the cold dampness of the dungeons pressing against his senses. The potions classroom was dark and oppressive, with strange specimens floating in glass jars along the walls. Harry took a seat beside Hermione, noting the curious and sometimes hostile glances from the Slytherin students already present. Draco Malfoy entered with his usual swagger, his pale eyes immediately finding Harry. "Still glowing, Potter. How inconvenient for brewing. You'll light up the dungeons like a Lumos charm gone wrong." Several Slytherins snickered, but Harry forced himself to remain calm, keeping his expression neutral. The golden light beneath his skin maintained its steady pulse, neither dimming nor intensifying. Before Malfoy could continue his taunting, the classroom door banged open, and Snape swept in, his black robes billowing dramatically. The room fell instantly silent. Like McGonagall, Snape began by taking roll call, pausing at Harry's name. "Ah, yes," he said softly. "Harry Potter. Our new celebrity." More Slytherin snickers, but Snape silenced them with a look before fixing his dark gaze on Harry. The expected hostility was there, certainly, but also something more complex that Harry couldn't quite identify. Snape launched into an introduction to the subtle art of potion making, his soft voice somehow commanding complete attention. When he finished, he suddenly barked, "Potter. What would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood? Hermione's hand shot up beside him, but Harry was surprised to find he knew the answer, or at least, part of him did. A sleeping potion, sir, he answered cautiously. The Draught of Living Death, I think it's called. Snape's eyebrows rose fractionally. Correct. And where would you look if I asked you to find a bezoar? Again, knowledge surfaced from somewhere in Harry's fragmented memories. The stomach of a goat, sir. It can save you from most poisons. Snape's expression shifted subtly. Indeed. And what is the difference between monkshood and wolfsbane? They're the same plant, sir. Harry found himself answering with growing confidence. Also called aconite. A heavy silence fell over the classroom. Snape studied Harry with renewed intensity, clearly not having expected correct answers to his impromptu quiz. It seems, he said finally, that fame isn't everything. 5 points to Gryffindor for adequate preparation. The Gryffindors exchanged shocked glances at Snape awarding points to their house, something apparently unprecedented based on their reactions. The remainder of the lesson involved brewing a simple potion to cure boils. As promised, Hermione was paired with Harry, taking the lead on the actual brewing while he prepared ingredients. Snape prowled the classroom, criticizing almost everyone except, surprisingly, Harry and Hermione, whose potion he merely glanced at with a curt nod. How did you know those answers? Hermione whispered as they worked. I only knew them because I read all the textbooks in advance. I'm not sure, Harry admitted, carefully crushing snake fangs. The knowledge was just, there. Like I'd learned it before and forgotten. Another suppressed memory surfacing? Maybe. Or maybe. Harry lowered his voice further. Maybe it has something to do with Snape specifically. He knew my parents. Maybe there's some connection I don't remember yet. Before Hermione could respond, disaster struck at Neville Longbottom's cauldron. It melted into a twisted blob, sending potion seeping across the stone floor. Neville, drenched in the mixture, moaned in pain as angry red boils sprang up on his arms and face. Idiot boy! Snape snarled, clearing the spilled potion with a wave of his wand. You added the porcupine quills before taking the cauldron off the fire. Take him to the hospital wing, he spat at Neville's partner, Seamus Finnegan. As the commotion unfolded, Harry felt a strange surge of energy within him, responding to the chaotic emotions in the room. The golden light beneath his skin brightened, and he felt an instinctive desire to reach out toward Neville, to somehow help. Potter, Snape's sharp voice cut through his focus. Control yourself. Harry blinked, realizing his hand was extended toward Neville, golden light pulsing visibly from his fingertips. He quickly lowered it, forcing the energy back using his meditation techniques. Sorry, sir, he muttered. It was instinctive. Snape's dark eyes studied him with that same unreadable expression. See me after class, he said curtly before returning to his desk. When the bell rang, Harry approached Snape's desk with apprehension, telling Ron and Hermione to go ahead to lunch. You wish to see me, Professor? Snape waited until the last student had departed before speaking. What exactly were you attempting to do to Longbottom, Potter? I'm not sure, sir, Harry answered honestly. When I saw he was hurt, I felt this urge to help. The energy just responded automatically. Healing, Snape identified. Your elemental magic was attempting to manifest as healing energy. Harry blinked in surprise. Is that possible? Elemental magic can manifest in numerous ways, healing being one of the rarer and more complex forms. Snape's tone remained neutral, but his gaze was sharp with interest. Have you experienced this impulse before? Harry thought back through his newly recovered memories. Yes, he realized. When I was younger, I sometimes healed my own minor injuries, cuts and bruises from Dudley's bullying. I didn't understand what I was doing then, just that I could make the pain stop if I concentrated hard enough. Snape nodded as if this confirmed something. Spontaneous healing is often the first manifestation of elemental abilities in children, typically in response to personal injury. Extending that ability to others, however, indicates significant power and control. But I didn't actually heal Neville, Harry pointed out. You stopped me before anything happened. Fortunately, Snape replied dryly. Untrained healing attempts can be dangerous, particularly with your current instability. The impulse may have been benevolent, but the execution could have been catastrophic. Harry absorbed this, realizing Snape had potentially prevented him from accidentally harming Neville further despite his good intentions. Your knowledge of potions' ingredients was unexpected, Snape continued, changing the subject abruptly. Particularly given your Muggle upbringing. Harry hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. I think it might be related to the memory charms breaking down. I'm remembering things I shouldn't know, or things I once knew but was made to forget. Snape's expression remained carefully neutral. Indeed. And these, recovered memories. Do they include anything about your parents? The question caught Harry off guard. Not much, he admitted. Fragments mostly. Why? Something flickered in Snape's dark eyes, an emotion Harry couldn't identify before it was swiftly suppressed. Your mother was exceptionally talented at potions, he said finally. It would be unsurprising if certain aptitudes were inherited. Before Harry could process this unexpected personal information, Snape continued briskly. You will need to exercise particular caution in this classroom. Potions' ingredients can react unpredictably to external magical energies. Your condition could potentially interfere with delicate brewing processes. Yes, sir, Harry agreed. I'll be careful. See that you are. Snape paused, seeming to debate internally before adding, the headmaster has requested updates on your condition. What would you prefer I tell him? Again, Harry was caught off guard by the implied choice. You're asking what I want you to report. I am asking, Snape clarified, how much detail you wish shared regarding your recovering abilities and memories. As your medical situation is technically confidential, I have some discretion in what specific information is conveyed. Harry considered this carefully, surprised by what seemed like Snape offering him a degree of privacy from Dumbledore's oversight. I'd prefer if the specifics of what I'm remembering stayed private, he decided. Just general updates on my stability, I guess. Snape nodded once. Very well. You may go, Potter. And remember, control is essential, particularly as more of your suppressed abilities resurface. Harry left the potions classroom with his head spinning from the unexpectedly civil interaction. Snape's behavior continued to puzzle him. The man clearly disliked him on some level, yet seemed genuinely concerned about his medical condition and was now apparently offering to limit what information reached Dumbledore. As he climbed the stairs from the dungeons, the monitoring device in his pocket suddenly grew warm. He pulled it out to find it glowing a soft orange, not the urgent red of immediate danger, but a clear warning nonetheless. Sighing, he changed direction toward the hospital wing. His first day of classes wasn't even half over, and already his unstable magic was requiring medical attention. Another memory charm breaking down on its own, Pomfrey announced after examining him. This one appears to date from when you were approximately 4 years old. Harry sat on the edge of the hospital bed, watching the diagnostic display where another section of red binding was cracking, golden tendrils pushing through. Is it dangerous? He asked. Not immediately, Pomfrey replied, but the process is accelerating. I'd like to remove it properly rather than letting it fracture chaotically. Harry nodded his consent, and Pomfrey began the now familiar incantation. As the silver-blue thread emerged from his temple, he was plunged into another recovered memory, age 4. The Dursleys had guests coming, important clients of Uncle Vernon's. Harry had been scrubbing the kitchen floor when Dudley deliberately tracked mud through his clean work. Frustration and anger had welled up inside him, and suddenly all the dishes in Aunt Petunia's china cabinet had shattered simultaneously. Punishment had been swift and severe, the cupboard for 3 days with minimal food. But on the second night, an unexpected visitor had appeared, not Dumbledore this time, but a severe-looking woman with dark hair pulled into a tight bun. "Mr. Potter," she'd said softly, kneeling beside his cupboard mattress. "My name is Professor McGonagall. I'm here to check on you." "How did you get in?" he'd asked, wide-eyed with wonder. "The door is locked." "Magic, Mr. Potter." She'd produced a wand, creating a tiny glowing bird that fluttered around his cupboard, bringing momentary joy to his punishment. "Just like what you did with the dishes, though that was accidental magic." "Magic isn't real," he'd repeated automatically, parroting Uncle Vernon's constant refrain. "Uncle Vernon says, your uncle," McGonagall had interrupted, her lips thinning with disapproval, "is wrong. Magic is very real. You are a wizard, Mr. Potter, just like your parents before you." "My parents?" The mention had electrified him. They had magic too. Indeed. They were exceptional wizards, both of them. "And you will be too, when you're old enough to attend Hogwarts." She'd explained then about the magical school, about his parents' sacrifice, about his future place in the wizarding world. For one glorious hour, hope had blossomed in his young heart. Then footsteps on the stairs. McGonagall tensing, transforming instantly into a tabby cat with square markings around its eyes. The cat slipping under the gap in the cupboard door just as it opened to reveal Dumbledore. "Hello, Harry," he'd said kindly. "I see you've had another bout of accidental magic." "Nothing to worry about, perfectly natural for a young wizard." "Professor McGonagall told me about Hogwarts," Harry had blurted out excitedly. "And about my parents being wizards too." Dumbledore's expression had changed subtly. "Professor McGonagall? I'm afraid there's no one here by that name, Harry." But she was just, he'd looked around the cupboard, finding it empty except for himself and Dumbledore. She turned into a cat. "Ah, dreams," Dumbledore had said sympathetically. "The imagination is a powerful thing, especially in children. But I'm afraid Professor McGonagall exists only at Hogwarts, where she teaches transfiguration. You'll meet her eventually, but not for many years yet." Confusion had flooded Harry's young mind. Had he dreamed it? But it had seemed so real. "Now then," Dumbledore had continued, raising his wand. "Let's make sure your relatives aren't too harsh about the broken dishes, shall we? And perhaps we should let your imagination rest a while longer. The time for such knowledge will come, but not yet." A flash of light, and the memory was gone, along with the hope it had brought. Harry emerged from the memory gasping, his eyes immediately finding Pomfrey's. "McGonagall visited me," he said urgently. "When I was 4. She told me about magic, about Hogwarts, about my parents. Then Dumbledore came and made me forget. He made me think I'd imagined her." Pomfrey studied the extracted charm with a troubled expression. "This confirms what we suspected. The headmaster's interference extended beyond you to other staff members as well." She turned into a cat, Harry continued, processing the memory. "When she heard Dumbledore coming. She was checking on me secretly. Minerva is an animagus, a witch who can transform into an animal at will," Pomfrey explained. "The tabby cat with square markings is her form. She's been trying to help me all along," Harry realized. "Even back then. But Dumbledore kept stopping her, kept making both of us forget." "It would appear so," Pomfrey agreed grimly. "Which raises serious questions about the headmaster's motivations regarding your upbringing." Before they could discuss this further, the hospital wing doors opened to admit the very subject of their conversation, Professor McGonagall herself, looking concerned. "Poppy?" "Mr. Weasley informed me Harry's monitoring device activated during potions." Her sharp eyes took in the diagnostic display. "Another charm breaking down?" "Yes," Pomfrey confirmed. "From when he was 4 years old. A rather significant one, as it happens." McGonagall turned to Harry, noticing his intense scrutiny. "Is something wrong, Mr. Potter?" "You visited me," Harry said directly. When I was 4. After I accidentally broke Aunt Petunia's dishes. You came to my cupboard and told me about magic, about Hogwarts, about my parents. You turned into a cat when Dumbledore arrived. McGonagall went very still, her face paling slightly. She began, then stopped, her brow furrowing in confusion. That's not possible. I never. She trailed off, her expression troubled. The memory was suppressed in both of you, Pomfrey explained gently. The charm I just removed from Mr. Potter was placed by Albus, according to its magical signature. McGonagall sank into the nearest chair, her usually impeccable posture failing her momentarily. I remember now, she said softly. Not completely, but, fragments. I was concerned about Harry's welfare. Arabella Figg had reported the Dursleys' mistreatment. I went to investigate without informing Albus. She looked up at Harry, her eyes unusually bright. I found you locked in that cupboard, punished for accidental magic you couldn't control. I was furious. I planned to report back to the Wisengamot, to have you removed from that household immediately. But Dumbledore stopped you, Harry concluded. Made you forget what you'd seen. McGonagall nodded slowly. It would appear so. Though even now, my memory of the incident remains fragmentary. She turned to Pomfrey. Could there be memory charms on me as well? Placed by Albus? Entirely possible, Pomfrey confirmed grimly. Given what we've learned about his methods regarding Harry, it wouldn't be surprising if he took similar measures with staff members who questioned his decisions. McGonagall's expression hardened. I want you to check, Poppy. Now. Pomfrey hesitated only briefly before raising her wand. This is a diagnostic only, it won't remove any charms found, merely identify them. She performed a complex movement, murmuring an incantation different from the one she'd used on Harry. Golden light emanated from her wand, surrounding McGonagall's head briefly before coalescing into a glowing display similar to Harry's but smaller in scale. 3, Pomfrey announced, her voice tight with controlled anger. 3 distinct memory charms, all bearing Albus's magical signature. The oldest dates to approximately 7 years ago, consistent with your recovered memory of visiting Harry. The others are more recent, one from about 2 years ago, the third from last year. McGonagall's lips pressed into such a thin line they almost disappeared. Remove them, she instructed, her Scottish brogue more pronounced than Harry had ever heard it. All of them. Minerva, Pomfrey cautioned, memory charm removal can be disorienting. Perhaps we should schedule this when you don't have classes. Now, Poppy, McGonagall insisted. I need to know what else has been hidden from me. What else I've been prevented from doing for Lily and James's son. Pomfrey nodded reluctantly. Very well. Mr. Potter, perhaps you should return to lunch while I attend to Professor McGonagall. Actually, McGonagall interjected, I'd prefer if Harry stayed. These memories concern him directly, if my suspicions are correct. Harry nodded, settling back on the hospital bed to observe as Pomfrey began the now familiar charm removal process. The first silver-blue thread emerged from McGonagall's temple, longer and more complex than those Harry had experienced. As it separated fully, McGonagall gasped, her eyes widening in shock. The blood wards, she whispered. I discovered they were failing. 2 years ago, I performed a routine check of the protective enchantments around Privet Drive, standard procedure for magically vulnerable minors. The blood protection was deteriorating because there was no love in that home, none of the familial bonds the magic required to sustain itself. What happened? Harry asked, fascinated by this revelation. I confronted Albus, McGonagall continued, her memory clearly returning in vivid detail. I told him you needed to be moved immediately, that the protection was becoming dangerously unstable. He assured me he would handle it personally. Her expression darkened. Then he offered me tea in his office. The next thing I recall is agreeing that you should remain with your relatives for maximum protection. Pomfrey was already moving to remove the second charm. Another silver blue thread, another gasp from McGonagall. Last summer, she said, her voice tight with anger. Arabella reported that your uncle had struck you during an episode of accidental magic. I went to Privet Drive immediately, found you locked in that cupboard again, clearly undernourished and sporting a bruise on your cheek. Harry remembered the incident vaguely. He'd accidentally turned a teacher's wig blue at school, and Uncle Vernon had backhanded him upon receiving the angry phone call. I brought you to Hogwarts, McGonagall continued, her memory still unfolding. To the hospital wing. Poppy treated the bruising and malnutrition. We were preparing documentation for the Wisingamot to have you permanently removed from the Dursleys' custody. She looked up at Pomfrey, whose face had gone pale with shock. You don't remember this either, do you, Poppy? Pomfrey shook her head slowly. No, though now that you mention it, I have a strange gap in my records from last July. I assumed it was a filing error. It wasn't, McGonagall said grimly. Albus found us preparing the documentation. He insisted we discuss the matter privately in his office. Then, nothing. My next clear memory is returning to my summer cottage, convinced that while the Dursleys were less than ideal guardians, the blood protection outweighed any concerns. Harry stared at her, stunned by these revelations. Not only had Dumbledore been systematically suppressing his abilities and memories, but he'd been doing the same to staff members who attempted to help him. The final charm, Poppy, McGonagall instructed, her voice steely with determination. Let's see what else has been hidden. The third silver blue thread emerged, and McGonagall fell silent for a long moment as the memory reintegrated. Your Hogwarts letter, she said finally, looking directly at Harry. I insisted on delivering it personally, given your Muggle upbringing. Albus refused, saying the standard owl post would suffice. When I pressed the issue, arguing that you deserved a proper introduction to the magical world, he became unusually adamant. She paused, her brow furrowing as she sorted through the returning memory. We argued. I reminded him that all Muggle-raised students receive personal visits from staff members, standard protocol to ease the transition. He claimed your case was unique and required specialized handling. Let me guess, Harry said bitterly. Another meeting in his office? Another cup of tea? McGonagall nodded grimly. Precisely. When I left, I was convinced that the owl post was indeed the best approach for your particular situation. I even helped craft the ridiculous letter addressing system, Mr. H. Potter, the cupboard under the stairs, without questioning why a child would be living in such conditions. A heavy silence fell as they all processed these disturbing revelations. McGonagall's face had gone from shock to furious, her usually composed demeanor cracking to reveal genuine rage. I have been prevented from fulfilling my duties as deputy headmistress, she said, her voice dangerously quiet. Prevented from protecting a vulnerable student. Prevented from honoring my promise to Lily and James Potter that I would look after their son if anything happened to them. She stood abruptly, straightening her robes with sharp movements. This cannot stand, Poppy. The systematic manipulation of both Harry's life and the staff members who sought to help him goes beyond mere questionable judgment. It represents a fundamental breach of trust and abuse of power. What will you do? Pomfrey asked, clearly concerned about the implications of challenging Dumbledore directly. First, McGonagall replied, I will have you check the other staff members who might have had similar interactions with Mr. Potter or expressed concerns about his placement. Hagrid, certainly. Possibly Phileas and Pomona as well. She turned to Harry, her expression softening slightly. As for you, Mr. Potter, I offer my deepest apologies for failing to protect you all these years. Had I remembered my own observations and actions, your childhood would have been very different. It wasn't your fault, Harry said immediately. You tried to help. Dumbledore stopped you. Nevertheless. McGonagall's voice held firm conviction. As your head of house and as deputy headmistress, I have a responsibility to your well-being that transcends even the headmaster's authority in certain matters. From this point forward, I assure you that your interests and safety will be my primary concern, regardless of any greater good Albus might invoke. The declaration hung in the air, powerful in its simplicity and the determination behind it. Harry felt a weight lift from his shoulders, the knowledge that at least one adult in the magical world was firmly in his corner, free from Dumbledore's influence and manipulation. "Thank you, Professor," he said simply. McGonagall nodded once, her composure returning. "Now then, I believe you're stable enough to return to afternoon classes, according to Poppy's earlier assessment. I shall escort you to the Great Hall for what remains of the lunch period." As they walked through the corridors, McGonagall spoke again, her tone deliberately casual. "I understand from Madame Pomfrey that you've recovered memories of early self-directed magical training. Elemental manipulation, if I'm not mistaken." Harry nodded. "From a book I found when I was 8. I was teaching myself to control the golden light, the raw magical energy. I could make it take different forms, respond to my intentions." "Remarkable," McGonagall commented. "And these skills, are they returning along with the memories?" "Some of them," Harry confirmed. "The meditation techniques, the visualization exercises. The actual manipulation is harder because my magic is still unstable." "Indeed." McGonagall appeared to consider something carefully before continuing. "Mr. Potter, I would like to offer additional instruction beyond your regular classes. Private sessions to help you regain control of your elemental abilities in a safe, supervised environment." Harry looked at her in surprise. "You know about elemental magic?" "Not extensively," she admitted. "As I mentioned yesterday, true elemental wizards are exceedingly rare. However, certain principles of magical control are universal across disciplines. My expertise in transfiguration, which requires precise visualization and intent, may prove useful in helping you re-establish your connection to your elemental abilities." "That would be brilliant," Harry said enthusiastically, then hesitated. "But what about Dumbledore? Won't he try to stop you?" McGonagall's expression hardened again. "Let him try," she said simply. "Your magical education is my responsibility as deputy headmistress. How I choose to supplement that education falls well within my authority." They had reached the Great Hall, where lunch was still in progress. Before entering, McGonagall placed a gentle hand on Harry's shoulder. "One more thing, Mr. Potter. While I understand and share your anger toward the headmaster, I must caution you about confronting him directly at this stage. Your magical control is still developing, and strong emotional reactions could trigger dangerous manifestations." Harry nodded, recognizing the wisdom in her advice. "I'll be careful, Professor." "Good. Now, join your friends. I believe Mr. Weasley has been saving you a portion of shepherd's pie with remarkable dedication." Sure enough, Ron had a plate set aside at the Gryffindor table, which he pushed toward Harry as he sat down. "Everything all right?" Hermione asked immediately, noting McGonagall's unusually protective manner as she'd escorted Harry in. "Not exactly," Harry replied quietly, glancing toward the staff table where Dumbledore sat in his ornate chair, apparently oblivious to the significant developments unfolding among his staff. "But I think I've found another ally." As he explained McGonagall's recovered memories to his friends in hushed tones, Harry felt a strange mixture of emotions, anger at the extent of Dumbledore's manipulation, but also hope that the truth was finally emerging, one memory charm at a time. The golden light beneath his skin pulsed with renewed energy, responding to his determination. Whatever Dumbledore's plans had been, they were unraveling now, and Harry intended to make the most of his newfound freedom, one recovered ability at a time. The remainder of Harry's first day passed in a blur of new classes, curious stares, and the occasional need to employ his meditation techniques when his magic responded too enthusiastically to his emotions. By dinner time, he was mentally exhausted but strangely energized, as if parts of his mind and magic long dormant were stretching awake after years of forced sleep. As he ate with Ron and Hermione, discussing the day's events, Professor McGonagall approached their table. "Mr. Potter," she said briskly, "after dinner, I'll show you to the private room I mentioned this morning. It's adjacent to Gryffindor Tower and will provide space for both sleeping and practicing your control exercises. Thanks, Professor, Harry replied, noting the curious glances from his housemates. Additionally, McGonagall continued, we'll begin your supplementary lessons tomorrow evening after your regular classes. 7 o'clock in my office. After she departed, Seamus Finnegan leaned across the table. Supplementary lessons. Already in trouble, Harry? Not trouble, Harry corrected, choosing his words carefully. Just some extra help adjusting to magic after growing up with muggles. It wasn't entirely untrue, though it certainly wasn't the whole truth. When dinner concluded, McGonagall led Harry, Ron, and Hermione up to Gryffindor Tower, but stopped at a seemingly blank wall a few meters from the fat lady's portrait. Celtic harmony, she said clearly, causing the wall to shimmer and reveal a wooden door. This is one of Hogwarts' adaptive rooms, spaces that reveal themselves when needed. It was likely a professor's quarters centuries ago, but has been unused in recent memory. She opened the door to reveal a comfortable circular room with a four-poster bed similar to those in the dormitories, a desk, bookshelves, and a small sitting area. A large open space in the center of the room had been cleared of furniture, presumably for practicing magic. The password is temporary, McGonagall explained. You may change it to something of your choosing. Mr. Weasley and Miss Granger are authorized visitors, but I would suggest limiting knowledge of this space to minimize disruptions. Harry nodded, appreciating both the privacy and the implicit permission for his friends to help him. Wicked, Ron breathed, examining the room. It's like having your own flat in the castle. It's for safety, not privilege, McGonagall reminded him sternly. Mr. Potter's condition requires space for controlled practice and recovery. Of course, Professor, Hermione agreed quickly. We understand it's not a social arrangement. After McGonagall departed, the three friends settled into the comfortable chairs near the fireplace. So, Hermione began, her expression serious, I've been researching elemental magic in the library between classes. There's not much information available in the general collection, but I did find some interesting references. Like what? Harry asked, genuinely curious about his condition. Well, according to Historical Anomalies in Wizarding Development, elemental wizards typically manifest their abilities in early childhood, usually between ages 3 and 7. The initial manifestations are almost always tied to emotional events. That matches my recovered memories, Harry confirmed. My first conscious use of the golden light was when I was 5, after Dudley and his gang had been chasing me all day. I was hiding in my cupboard, wishing for light to read by, and suddenly there it was, a little ball of golden energy floating above my palm. The book also mentioned that elemental abilities often manifest through natural elements first, fire, water, air, earth, before progressing to manipulation of raw magical energy, Hermione continued. Did you experience that progression? Harry thought back through his fragmentary memories. Sort of. I remember making water droplets float and form shapes. And I could create tiny flames that didn't burn. But the golden light, the raw magic, was always there too, right from the beginning. That's unusual according to the texts, Hermione noted. Most elemental wizards spend years mastering individual elements before accessing raw magical energy directly. Maybe that's why Dumbledore was so determined to suppress Harry's abilities, Ron suggested. If he was developing faster than normal, maybe that scared him. Or made him more valuable as a weapon against Voldemort, Harry added grimly. Both of his friends flinched at the name, but neither corrected him. What about control techniques? Harry asked, turning back to Hermione. Did you find anything that might help me regain control now that the charms are breaking down? Some basic principles, she replied, pulling a notebook from her bag. Meditation is mentioned consistently as fundamental to elemental control. Visualization exercises, too, creating detailed mental constructs to shape the magic. And emotional regulation is apparently crucial, which matches what you've experienced with your magic responding to strong feelings. I've got the book that I found at Mrs. Figg's, Harry remembered, retrieving it from his trunk. Madame Pomfrey returned it to me this morning. The three of them bent over elemental theory, a practical approach to natural magic, examining its contents with fascination. The book was clearly old but well preserved, with moving illustrations demonstrating various techniques. "This is incredible," Hermione breathed, tracing a diagram showing energy flow patterns. "This is postgraduate level magical theory, Harry. And you were teaching yourself from this at age 8? Apparently, Harry replied, feeling a renewed surge of anger at how thoroughly his natural development had been suppressed. "And I was making progress too, until Dumbledore found out and made me forget it all." "Well, you have it back now," Ron said practically. "And this time, you've got us to help. Plus McGonagall, who's definitely on your side after what you told us about her memories being modified." Harry nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude for his friend's unwavering support. "Let's start with the basic exercises tonight." I remembered most of the meditation techniques after the charms started breaking down, but the actual control exercises are still fragmented. For the next hour, they worked through the first chapter of the book, which focused on basic energy awareness and control. Harry sat cross-legged in the center of the cleared space, practicing the visualization techniques with Ron and Hermione offering encouragement and observations. "The golden light responds when you exhale," Hermione noted, watching closely. "It pulses brighter with each breath out." Harry nodded, his eyes closed in concentration. "I can feel it flowing through specific channels now, like rivers of energy following pathways through my body." He extended his hand, palm up, focusing on gathering the golden light into a visible manifestation. Slowly, particles of light seemed to coalesce above his palm, forming a small, flickering sphere about the size of a snitch. "You're doing it!" Ron exclaimed, then immediately lowered his voice when the sphere wavered. "Sorry." Harry maintained his focus, stabilizing the sphere. With careful concentration, he made it rise a few inches above his palm, then descend again. "It feels right," he said softly. "Like remembering how to ride a bicycle after years of not trying." He allowed the sphere to dissipate, opening his eyes to find both his friends staring at him with expressions of wonder. "That was beautiful," Hermione said. "And completely different from regular spellcasting. You didn't use an incantation or a wand, just pure intention and focus. That's the core of elemental magic according to the book," Harry explained, feeling more comfortable with the concept as his memories continued to resurface. "It's about direct manipulation of magical energy without the intermediary tools most wizards need." "No wonder Dumbledore was worried," Ron commented. "If you can do magic without a wand or spells, that's a huge advantage." "Or a huge responsibility," Harry countered, remembering Snape's warnings about control. "Without the focusing properties of a wand or the structured framework of spells, it's easy to lose control, especially when emotions get involved." As if to illustrate his point, a wave of exhaustion suddenly hit him, and the golden light beneath his skin flared erratically. A nearby book fell from the shelf, and the fire in the grate momentarily blazed higher. "I think that's enough practice for tonight," Hermione said firmly. "You're still recovering, Harry. Pushing too hard could be dangerous." Harry nodded reluctantly, recognizing the wisdom in her caution. "Tomorrow I'll start proper training with McGonagall. Hopefully that will help stabilize things." As Ron and Hermione prepared to return to their regular dormitories, Hermione paused at the door. "Harry, have you considered what happens when all the memory charms are gone? When you've recovered everything that was suppressed?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. "Not really," Harry admitted. "I've been so focused on understanding what's happening now, I haven't thought much about what comes after." "Well, I have," she continued cautiously. "Based on what we've seen so far, your elemental abilities are extraordinarily powerful. Once fully unleashed without the bindings." She hesitated. "You may become one of the most powerful wizards alive." The statement was delivered matter-of-factly, typical Hermione analysis, but it sent a chill down Harry's spine. Not because he feared power itself, but because of what such power would mean for his already complicated life. "All the more reason to master control now," he said finally. "Before things get even more intense." After his friends departed, Harry prepared for bed, his mind still processing the day's revelations. As he lay beneath the covers, watching the golden light pulse gently beneath his skin, he found himself wondering about the memories still locked away, particularly those from the night his parents died. What would he discover when the foundation charms finally broke? What had really happened that night in Godric's Hollow? And why had Dumbledore been so determined to keep him from remembering? These questions followed him into sleep, where his dreams were filled with fragments of memory still fighting to break free, a woman's voice singing softly, a man's laughter, a flash of green light, and always, pulsing beneath everything, the golden glow of his awakening elemental nature. Harry woke with a gasp, golden light flaring brightly beneath his skin. For a moment, he was disoriented, the unfamiliar room adding to his confusion. Then the details of the dream that had awakened him came flooding back, not a nightmare, but a memory struggling to surface. His mother's face, leaning over his crib. Not frightened as he'd always imagined in his rare dreams of her, but determined, focused. Her wand moving in complex patterns as she chanted in a language that wasn't Latin, something older, more primal. "Lily, he's coming," his father's voice from downstairs. "Take Harry and go." But his mother hadn't fled. Instead, she'd completed the chant, pressing her wand to Harry's chest directly over his heart. Golden light had flowed from the wand into him, merging with something already present within him, his nascent elemental nature. "My gift to you," she'd whispered. "What's in my blood, now in yours. Remember, Harry, intent is everything." Then the door blasting open. Voldemort's high, cold voice, "Stand aside, you foolish girl. Not Harry, please not Harry. Stand aside now. Take me, kill me instead," the flash of green light. His mother falling. But as Voldemort turned his wand on Harry, something extraordinary had happened. The golden light his mother had infused into him had surged outward instinctively, forming a protective sphere around his crib. When the killing curse struck, the golden light hadn't blocked it exactly, nothing could block Avada Kedavra, but it had somehow channeled it, redirected it, using Voldemort's own magic against him. The resulting explosion had been catastrophic. Voldemort's body destroyed, the house partially collapsed, and Harry left with nothing but a lightning-shaped scar and a connection to elemental magic that his mother had somehow strengthened in her final moments. Harry sat up, his heart racing. The memory hadn't come from a broken charm, it had emerged spontaneously, as if triggered by his practice with the golden light before bed. "She knew," he whispered into the darkness. "My mother knew about my elemental nature. She did something to enhance it, to protect me." This revelation changed everything. His abilities weren't just a random magical anomaly, they were connected to his mother, perhaps even inherited from her in some way. And she had deliberately strengthened that connection in her final moments, giving him the means to survive Voldemort's attack. He needed to tell someone, to confirm whether this dream memory could be trusted. But it was the middle of the night, and disturbing McGonagall or Pomfrey would have to wait until morning. Unable to sleep after such a revelation, Harry retrieved the elemental magic book and turned to a chapter he hadn't explored before, titled Magical Lineage and Elemental Inheritance. While most elemental wizards appear to develop their abilities spontaneously, careful study has revealed patterns of inheritance across certain magical families. The ability may lie dormant for generations before manifesting, typically triggered by specific magical circumstances or extreme emotional events. Of particular note are cases where latent elemental potential is activated through ritualistic means, usually by a parent possessing partial elemental alignment themselves. Such ritual activation is rare and typically performed only in dire circumstances, as it permanently alters the child's magical development. Harry read on, his excitement growing as the text seemed to confirm aspects of his dream memory. His mother must have possessed some form of elemental alignment herself, not fully developed like Harry's, but enough to recognize and enhance the potential in her son when threatened with imminent death. The ritual she'd performed in those final moments had been a mother's desperate attempt to protect her child with the only means available, her own magical legacy. As dawn approached, Harry finally set the book aside, his mind racing with the implications. If his elemental abilities were indeed an inheritance enhanced by his mother's sacrifice, then they were his birthright, not a dangerous anomaly to be suppressed, as Dumbledore had treated them, but a precious gift meant to protect and empower him. The question remained, had Dumbledore known this all along? Had he suppressed Harry's abilities despite knowing they were a mother's final gift to her son? The thought made the golden light flare with renewed intensity, responding to his rising anger. Harry quickly employed his meditation techniques, forcing his emotions back under control. Whatever the truth, he would discover it as the remaining memory charms broke down. And this time, no one, not even Albus Dumbledore, would take his birthright from him again. Breakfast in the Great Hall the next morning was interrupted by the arrival of the Daily Post. Hundreds of owls streamed in through the high windows, circling until they spotted their recipients. Harry, still processing his midnight revelation, was startled when a large barn owl landed directly in front of his plate, extending a leg with an official-looking envelope. "What's that?" Ron asked through a mouthful of sausage. Harry carefully untied the letter. The envelope bore an official ministry seal, a stylized M surrounded by arcane symbols. "It's from the Ministry of Magic," he said, feeling a knot form in his stomach. He broke the seal and unfolded the parchment inside. Ministry of Magic, Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes, Magical Anomaly Investigation Unit. Dear Mr. Potter, following the detection of a Class 3 magical anomaly at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry coinciding with your arrival, the Ministry is officially requesting your presence for examination and assessment. While we respect Hogwarts' authority in educational matters, the nature and magnitude of the detected anomaly falls under Ministry jurisdiction regarding public magical safety. A representative will arrive at Hogwarts on Friday, September 6 at 10 a.m. to conduct a standard evaluation. This is a mandatory assessment under Wizarding Statute 18.3.4 regarding unusual magical manifestations of potential public concern. Please be advised that failure to comply with this assessment may result in more stringent measures as authorized by the Wizengamot. Respectfully, Broderick Bode, Senior, Unspeakable Department of Mysteries. Harry looked up from the letter to find both Ron and Hermione watching him anxiously. "They can't force you to be examined, can they?" Hermione asked, clearly disturbed by the official tone of the letter. "You're a minor student under Hogwarts protection." "Apparently they think they can," Harry replied, handing her the letter. "Something about Wizarding Statute whatever." Ron peered over Hermione's shoulder, his expression growing serious as he read. "This isn't good, mate. When the Department of Mysteries gets involved, things get complicated." "Department of Mysteries?" Harry repeated. "What exactly is that?" "No one knows exactly," Ron explained, lowering his voice. "Dad says they study the most secret aspects of magic, things like time, death, thought, space. They're called unspeakables because they're not allowed to talk about their work. And they're interested in me," Harry concluded grimly. "Because of my elemental abilities, I assume." "Most likely," Hermione agreed, still studying the letter. "Though they're being careful not to specify the anomaly they detected. I wonder if they actually know what you are, or if they're just investigating the magical surge from your collapse. Either way, I don't much like the idea of being examined by Ministry officials," Harry said, the memory of Malfoy's calculating interest still fresh in his mind. "Especially not when I'm still figuring out what's happening to me myself." "You should show this to Professor McGonagall immediately," Hermione advised, handing back the letter. "As your head of house, she might be able to intervene." Harry nodded, glancing toward the staff table where McGonagall sat in conversation with Professor Flitwick. Dumbledore's chair was conspicuously empty this morning. After breakfast, Harry approached McGonagall, showing her the ministry letter. Her lips thinned as she read it, a sure sign of displeasure. "I see the ministry is wasting no time," she said crisply, folding the letter and handing it back. "Come to my office, Mr. Potter. We need to discuss this privately. Once in her office, McGonagall gestured for Harry to take a seat before settling behind her desk. I anticipated ministry interest after yesterday's visit from Mr. Wimple, she began. However, I did not expect them to involve the Department of Mysteries quite so quickly. Is that bad? Harry asked, though he already suspected the answer. It's concerning, McGonagall clarified. The unspeakables typically investigate only the most unusual magical phenomena. That they've taken an interest in your case suggests they may have more information about elemental wizards than is generally available. Could they actually force me to submit to an examination? McGonagall's expression grew troubled. Under normal circumstances, no. As a minor, you would be protected by both your guardians and the school. However, the statute they've cited creates a gray area. It was established during Grindelwald's rise to address potentially dangerous magical manifestations. So they're classifying me as potentially dangerous, Harry concluded bitterly. It would appear so, McGonagall agreed. Though I suspect their interest is more academic than cautionary. Elemental wizards are exceedingly rare, as we've established. The Department of Mysteries would naturally be interested in studying such a phenomenon. I'm not a laboratory specimen, Harry said firmly. I'm still trying to understand what's happening to me without becoming someone else's research project. McGonagall's expression softened slightly. A sentiment I share completely, Mr. Potter. However, we must approach this situation strategically. Outright refusal could escalate the ministry's involvement, potentially leading to more intrusive measures. What do you suggest? I believe we should set conditions for the examination, McGonagall replied. As your head of house, I can insist on being present throughout the procedure. We can also limit the scope of their investigation to non-invasive diagnostic spells and basic questions. No samples, no extended testing, and certainly no removal from Hogwarts grounds. Harry considered this, recognizing the wisdom in McGonagall's approach. That seems reasonable. Would they agree to those terms? They may not have a choice, McGonagall said with the hint of a smile. Particularly if we involve certain other parties. Like who? Madame Bones, for one. As head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, she has oversight regarding any ministry interactions with magical minors. She's known for her fairness and strict adherence to proper procedure. McGonagall pulled a sheet of parchment toward her. With your permission, I'll draft a response accepting the examination under specific protective conditions. I'll also contact Amelia Bones directly to ensure proper oversight of the process. Thank you, Professor, Harry said sincerely. It helps knowing you're looking out for me in all this. Something flickered in McGonagall's eyes, regret, perhaps. It's long overdue, Mr. Potter. Had I not been prevented from remembering my own observations and concerns, your situation would be very different today. You're helping now, Harry pointed out. That's what matters. McGonagall nodded once, then changed the subject. Now, regarding our supplementary lessons this evening. I've given careful thought to the approach we should take. Given what you've shared about your recovered memories and abilities, I believe we should focus initially on controlled manifestation exercises. I practiced a bit last night, Harry told her. Using the book from Mrs. Figg's house. I managed to create a small sphere of golden light and move it around. Excellent, McGonagall approved. That demonstrates your core abilities are indeed returning naturally as the suppression charms break down. Tonight we'll work on expanding that control to more complex manifestations. Harry hesitated, then decided to share his midnight revelation. Professor, last night I had a dream, or a memory, I think. About the night my parents died. McGonagall's expression grew grave. Go on. Harry described the dream in detail, his mother's ritual, the golden light she'd infused into him, the way his nascent elemental abilities had protected him from Voldemort's killing curse. When he finished, McGonagall sat in silence for a long moment. That is, remarkable, she said finally. And consistent with what little we know about that night. So you think it could be real? Not just a dream. I believe it could indeed be a suppressed memory beginning to surface, McGonagall confirmed. The foundation charms Madame Pomfrey identified, those placed immediately after your parents' deaths, would have hidden exactly such memories. But my mother, Harry pressed, needing confirmation of the part that meant the most to him. Could she have really known about my elemental nature? Could she have enhanced it somehow? McGonagall considered this carefully. Lily Potter was an extraordinarily talented witch, particularly in charms and potion-making. She also had an interest in ancient forms of magic. I recall her doing an independent study project on pre-Roman British magical practices during her final year at Hogwarts. She paused, choosing her words with care. As for enhancing your elemental nature, it's not inconceivable. There are ancient rituals designed to strengthen innate magical gifts, particularly from parent to child. Most have fallen out of practice due to their complexity and the personal sacrifice they typically require. Sacrifice, Harry repeated, thinking of his mother's final moments. She gave her life to protect me. Yes, McGonagall agreed softly. And in doing so, may have activated protections beyond what anyone anticipated, including Albus. This new perspective on his mother's sacrifice brought a lump to Harry's throat. Not just a mother standing in front of her child, but a powerful witch using her final moments to give him the means to survive, to channel his innate elemental magic into a shield against the unsurvivable. Could that be why Dumbledore suppressed my abilities? Harry asked. Because he didn't understand what my mother had done. Perhaps, McGonagall allowed. Or perhaps he understood all too well, and feared the implications. Before Harry could ask what she meant by that cryptic statement, the bell rang signaling the start of morning classes. You'd better hurry to charms, McGonagall said, rising from her desk. We'll continue this discussion during our session this evening. 7 o'clock, don't forget. As Harry rushed to charms class, his mind buzzed with the implications of everything he'd learned. His elemental nature wasn't just a random magical anomaly, it was a birthright, possibly inherited from his mother and certainly enhanced by her final sacrifice. Which raised the question, what else had Dumbledore hidden from him about his parents and his own magical legacy? Charms class proved to be both fascinating and frustrating for Harry. Professor Flitwick, a tiny wizard who had to stand on a stack of books to see over his desk, spent the first half of the lesson explaining the theory behind the levitation charm. Now, remember the nice wrist movement we've been practicing, squeaked Professor Flitwick, perched atop his pile of books. Swish and flick, remember, swish and flick. And saying the magic words properly is very important, too. Never forget Wizard Baraffio, who said S instead of F and found himself on the floor with a buffalo on his chest. When it came time for practical application, Harry was instructed to observe rather than participate, just as in Transfiguration. But as Hermione successfully levitated her feather on the first try, Harry found himself instinctively analyzing the magical process in a way that went beyond Flitwick's instructions. He could literally see the magical energy flowing from Hermione's wand to the feather, forming a connection that allowed her to direct its movement. What's more, he realized he could achieve the same effect without a wand or incantation, simply by extending his elemental energy to connect with the object directly. Without conscious decision, he focused on his own feather, extending a thin tendril of golden energy toward it. The feather rose smoothly into the air, hovering a foot above his desk. "Oh my goodness," squeaked Flitwick, noticing the floating feather and the visible strand of golden light connecting it to Harry's fingertip. "Mr. Potter. Are you doing that wandlessly?" The entire class turned to stare, and Harry's concentration wavered, causing the feather to flutter back down. "Sorry, Professor," he said quickly. "It was instinctive. I didn't mean to disrupt the class." Far from being upset, Flitwick clapped his tiny hands in delight. "Not disruptive at all, my boy. Wandless levitation is extremely advanced magic, most wizards never master it. 5 points to Gryffindor for exceptional magical aptitude." As the lesson continued, Harry noticed Flitwick watching him with increased interest, occasionally jotting notes on a small pad. When class ended, the tiny professor asked him to stay behind. "Mr. Potter," Flitwick began once the other students had left, "Professor McGonagall has informed the staff about your unique magical situation. While we've been instructed to limit your practical participation temporarily, I must say I'm fascinated by what I observed today." "It wasn't really a spell, sir," Harry explained. "More like, directly connecting with the feather using my magic." "Yes, exactly." Flitwick's excitement was evident. Classic elemental manipulation. Direct magical interaction without standard spell structures or wand focusing. Extremely rare and quite remarkable. Harry blinked, surprised by Flitwick's knowledge of the subject. "You know about elemental magic, Professor?" "Oh yes," Flitwick confirmed. "My doctoral research at the Magical Academy of Vienna focused on alternative magical manifestations, including elemental manipulation. Though I've never had the privilege of observing a true elemental wizard before today. So you could help me understand what's happening?" Harry asked hopefully. Flitwick's expression became more measured. "To some extent, yes. My knowledge is primarily theoretical rather than practical. However..." He glanced toward the door before continuing in a lower voice. "I would be delighted to offer whatever assistance I can, particularly regarding the control and direction of raw magical energy." "That would be brilliant, Professor," Harry said enthusiastically. "Professor McGonagall is already helping me, but, two perspectives are often better than one," Flitwick finished with a smile. "Particularly when dealing with such rare magical phenomena. Minerva's expertise in transfiguration provides excellent foundation for visualization and intent, while my charms background offers insight into energy flow and magical connectivity." He hopped down from his stack of books. "We shall coordinate, Minerva and I, to ensure a comprehensive approach to your training. Now, you'd best hurry to your next class before you're late." As Harry left the charms classroom, he felt a surge of optimism. Between McGonagall and Flitwick, he now had two knowledgeable professors committed to helping him understand and control his emerging abilities. For the first time since the memory charms began breaking down, he felt like he might actually master this strange power rather than being overwhelmed by it. The remainder of the day passed relatively smoothly, though Harry continued to attract as to something went wrong with this response. "Please try again. Trace ID, 707C49DC, E12A Right 2nd Chapter 3. Awakening. Harry gains control of substantial portions of his magic. Final revelations about why the charms were placed. Confrontation with primary antagonists. Resolution of immediate threats. New equilibrium established for Harry's education. Set up for Harry's continued journey with his Unbound Core. Reflection on identity and path forward. The Unbound Core. Story outline. Plot. In this alternate Harry Potter universe, Harry mysteriously collapses during his sorting ceremony. When rushed to the hospital wing, Madame Pomfrey discovers something alarming: 52 separate memory charms layered over years, systematically blocking not only Harry's memories but suppressing his magical core. As these charms begin to break down, Harry experiences surges of uncontrollable magic and recovers fragments of hidden memories, revealing a web of manipulation extending far beyond what anyone suspected. The story follows Harry's journey to discover who placed these charms, why his power was suppressed, and what it means for his future as his true potential emerges. Themes: hidden power and identity, Harry discovering who he truly is beyond the constructed narrative. Manipulation versus agency, the ethics of those who controlled Harry's development. Trust and betrayal, redefining relationships as hidden truths emerge. Power and responsibility, Harry's growth as his magical abilities expand dramatically. Healing from hidden trauma, processing recovered memories and emotional wounds. Character arcs Harry Potter. From magically suppressed and memory-altered boy to powerful young wizard reclaiming his true self and potential. Hermione Granger, from rule follower to fierce advocate. Questioning authority structures. Ron Weasley, navigating loyalty and jealousy while discovering family connections to Harry's situation. Severus Snape, reassessing his perception of Harry as the truth of his manipulation is revealed. Albus Dumbledore, morally complex figure whose motivations regarding the memory charms become increasingly questionable. Madame Pomfrey, Medical professional becoming Harry's fierce advocate against those who wish to maintain control. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.